Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Doing Virtue podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Criste, and in studio tonight, I have both of my co-hosts, finally, Mark LaRochelle and Brian Hicks. Today is President's Day, and we're not doing anything for it. And we have a whiskey to drink tonight that Mark's going to tell us about in just a minute. But before I get there, I'm going to introduce our guest for this evening, James O'Reilly. James is here, and he is the co-founder of the Broken Binnacle, which is a Substack publication. He's also the co-founder of a bartending company called Seeing Double, and currently he works as an associate at the Philos Project. James, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
All day I was thinking about what I was going to say for this introduction, and I kept being like, don't say James Siskanik, because we just had him on, and I was like, I might say it. It's
we really have Joe O'Reilly on today.
Yeah, James like, I really didn't want to go, so I sent Joe. They would never know. So tonight we're drinking Bowman Brothers. Mark, tell us about Bowman
take it away,
Brothers.
Mark.
You can just read what's on the bottle.
That's all I'm going to do. No, I found something.
Oh, nice. Let's go.
On Google.
Can I bring it up, dog?
Here, you can have. I'm not partaking because it's Lent.
He's a good boy.
And
See, one of those Exodus 90 guys can't talk about it.
Well,
I
can't talk about Fight Club
right now. First rule. No, like.
Do you have?
They're these two are doing like Exodus, and I'm not doing Exodus at all. So I gave up alcohol, and that's kind of it. So it's like,
yeah, I was very open on the podcast with James Siskanik. We had it was a morning podcast, and we had I made Irish coffees, and he was like, oh no, I'm not gonna have any. I was like, okay, yeah, I'm not gonna force you. And then on the podcast he was like, well, I'm doing Exodus, and I was like, well, I'm also doing Exodus, but I don't know, I still drink on the show. So yeah.
Yes, so this Bowman Brothers small batch, its oily and thick mouthfeel is immediately noticeable. I don't know what that means. You get vanilla, toffee, roasted nuts, and toasted oak hint with medium intensity.
Okay.
It's 90 proof.
Cool.
So.
All right. Well, this is Doing Virtue.
Catholic podcast.
Where virtue is what we do.
Cheers.
Cheers, gents. As always, I have a few comments on the bottle. The reason I got this, other than it was on sale for $34, which was actually a pretty good deal.
I like that little picture that you can see too.
Yeah, so I was looking at getting, there's a really solid bourbon called Jefferson's, and they've got like a reserve. They have a few different kinds. One of them has a boat, which is why I was going to get it. But this was right nearby, and it's kind of a cool bottle because it actually looks like, I don't think I have it. Elijah Craig is kind of what the bottle looks like.
Yes, it does.
But it's neat because the sticker on the back has a picture, so when you look through the bottle, you can see it, and it's I actually don't know who's on it, but it looks
Davy
like
Crockett.
It looks like Davy Crockett.
Something that isn't pieces.
At the Alamo.
Is that what it is? No, it's definitely not what it is. But I thought it was it looks very American, and it's President's Day, so
God
cheers
bless,
to America.
God bless Joe Biden.
Well, yes.
Well,
yes. We can.
Yeah. Agreed.
So,
Is it good? I'm going to live vicariously through you.
yes. It is.
Oily.
Yeah. the oily mouthfeel.
So this is
immediately
called,
noticeable. Got it.
It is immediately noticeable. It like dies off. Actually, I'm not. No. The flavor does. It like hits you.
The
and then
flavor
it
dies
kinda-
off. Yeah,
Yeah, it
a little
dies
bit.
off.
I was reading a review
Quite a
of
bit.
it, and it said that it like has no bite at all.
Yeah, it's really smooth. But I think it's a small batch, and it also it says it's copper distilled, which I don't know. I'm not sure what that adds, but I assume that it makes it smoother.
More expensive.
Probably more expensive, but for $34, it's not that expensive. I think it's pretty good.
Yeah.
I think for $34, I would do that again. So yeah, it's good. Little spice at the end, but
Would you use it to mix with?
because it's $34, I'd be tempted to, but I think it's a lot better than, like, it's definitely a step up from like Maker's Mark, and I would say it's kind of like a wild turkey. That's what I would put that at. So I don't know, anything over like $40 or $50, I wouldn't. I mean, honestly, even stuff that's cheaper, I wouldn't mix with. But I don't think I would mix with this. It's a little nicer.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be good for an old-fashioned.
Yeah, if you were
it's actually standing on its own legs a bit more.
Yeah, for sure. If it's, I mean, I wouldn't put it in like a sour or in something where there's a lot of other ingredients. But if it's primarily the whiskey. Yeah, I might do that. So tonight we have James on, and
It's another introduction. This game.
okay, all right.
2 and 5 minutes.
Someone else take it
Like,
away.
who's this guy again?
So we had
Take it away, Mark.
Yeah, I meant to reach out to a different James O'Reilly, so it's really awkward. No, let's get started. For anyone that doesn't know you, who would listen to this, I think most of our listeners right now are in Front Royal and probably know the O'Reilly clan. But if they're not, or if they for some reason don't know who you are, give us a little bit of a background on who you are and where you grew up, where you went to school, and then we'll get into some other things.
Yeah, of course. So Front Royal people would likely know the O'Reilly clan because we grew up in Front Royal. So our family home is actually just down the road. I just walked here. That was great. I didn't look at the map of the location you had sent me until tonight. I was like, oh my gosh, it's right there. I don't even have to drive. This is great. But yeah, I grew up in Front Royal. Went to Criste with you guys, of course. Played soccer with Brian and Mark here. That was a good time. I was the only senior
That was a great.
for my
this
senior
is
year,
true.
and
That
that's
was
so
awesome.
sad.
That was awesome.
But you guys were in Rome too for
Yeah.
for one part of it, so it was kind of just like 2 pseudo seasons. But yeah, graduated from Criste with a philosophy degree. Since then, I've gotten involved with the Near East space. Like you said, the Philos Project. I worked for the Catholic team there. It's primarily just a Protestant, non-denominational group, but they're not anti-Catholic by all means. They started a Catholic team, so got involved with them, and then started the Broken Binnacle February of 2022, so just over 2 years now. And that kind of came out of Christendom too, wanting to, a lot of what I think I would imagine inspired this podcast too, like wanting to keep the conversations going, keep that flame fanning and trying to spread it.
Mhm.
And then, of course, with the bartending, that was just something Joe and I were doing on the side. And we were like, let's try to incorporate this a little more, actually build it out. We have some good marketing here, just being twins. So, yeah, between those 3 things, I stay busy. I just started with a group in DC called Young Catholic Professionals too, and we just it's more of a ministry. So we do events and such in the DC area just for young Catholic professionals. So it's been a great experience just of getting to meet people who are, I mean, it's DC, it's an hour away, but it's Catholics who aren't in the kind of classic Front Royal Northern Virginia space. That's been just nice to actually meet people and like people who don't come from that background. So it's been good to be able to help and serve in that way. But yeah, that's...
And are you volunteering for that?
Yeah, that's just a volunteer role.
Okay.
Of course, there's ulterior motives because it's just good for networking too. It's not like
Sure.
I'm doing it out of like just zero selfish interest.
It's like 50% selfish.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
First question right off the bat: do you have any free time? Because it seems like you are doing loads of different things.
Yeah. I usually have to force myself to just like relax and like even like as hobbies, I play guitar. And that would just be kind of intermittent throughout the day. Like even just for lunch, I'll go do that. But there's definitely always things that are pressing that I need to do. So it's definitely become something that I have to be more intentional about, of actually like carving out time and be like, okay, I actually don't have any plans this weekend. I'm not going to make plans because I need to just kind of unwind a little bit.
Right.
But it's definitely kept me busy. And there's times where I'm sorely tempted to drop one of them.
Sure.
Which would be good. But it also depends because the bartending right now, it's not really wedding season. It's been quiet. The next gig we have isn't for, I think, another month or 2. But once the summer comes, that'll build up a lot more. But yeah, everything else is pretty consistent. So between all those, it's a lot of different things I'm juggling.
In my intro, I think I said the Philos Project. Is it Philos?
Yeah, so it's pronounced Philos.
Okay.
Of course, the root just comes the same place as philosophy, love of wisdom. Philos just means love, friendship kind of thing. So our goal is building friendships, community, bridges with, first of all, Near Eastern Christians in the Holy Land in those areas, but also just the peoples of the land as well. So we do a lot of stuff with, at least on my end, Jewish Catholic relations. Not as much on like the Jewish Muslim space because that one's a little harder to break into. And then just even spiritually, in terms of patrimony, we just don't have as much in common with them. So
Yeah.
The Philos Project, that's how it's pronounced. Don't worry, everyone says Philos or something like that.
Yeah. How did you find out about that? Like, was that something you were pursuing, like while you were at Christendom that you or was that like later on you found out about it and went for it?
No, it was the plan was to go into teaching after Christendom. I was looking at different teaching positions last semester of senior year, and then my brother-in-law dissuaded me from doing that, saying like, that's great, like I don't care that you want to go into teaching, I think that's great, but go out, get some more like practical real life experience, and then bring that back into academia where you have a more well-rounded approach. You haven't just been living in the ivory tower college and onward. So I'm happy that I decided not to go that track. I mean, I would still love to do that down the road, go back to school and then teach undergrad or graduate level in philosophy or history. But I decided not to do the teaching, and then I was kind of just bouncing around. That summer I was just working for my dad here in Front Royal for his vacation company, which you, Anthony, have worked for in the past.
Rolling River Holiday.
Rolling River Holidays, yeah. Get it out there. Go follow them. Check them out. Stay there. But I got contacted by my now director at Philos Catholic, his name is Andrew Doran. But he was running another nonprofit called In Defense of Christians, IDC for short. Not a great acronym for Gen Z crowd, IDC. I don't care. But I got involved with him just doing part-time research work, and that was researching things like Christian persecution in Nigeria and in Africa and in the Middle East, in Syria. And then that part-time, it was just research for him. It wasn't actually, it was kind of for In Defense of Christians, but they just liked it. And then they brought me on part-time to work with them, just doing the research. And during that time, I was also getting involved with Philos because they had leadership programs. And this was my sister Grace. She knew Andrew, had worked for him before. She found Philos and found their programming. It was like, hey, James, you should check this out. So I did. And it was this online program that these classes that Philos makes called Pathfinder. And it was on kind of all things Near East, like Islam 101, Near Eastern Christian communities, Christian-Jewish relations in the Bible, history, and today, security dynamics in the Near East, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, like everything, like religion, politics, pretty much the whole slew of that space.
And that's resources they put out to people who follow the project, or is that resources for people who work for the project?
It's for anyone. So it's just, they're trying to educate on the space, the Near East space. And by Near East, I just mean Middle East generally, and then specifically the Holy Land, Levant area, Egypt, Syria, Israel, all of that. But I got involved with those. They're free. It's online. Anyone can take them. And through this, there's this application process where you can sign up then for, once you complete the online courses. And they're not that long. If you put in the time, it's really not too much. But then they have these in-person retreats that you can sign up for if you finish the online classes. And I did that and got to meet the people at the Philos Project, the president, Robert Nicholson. Nice. And they just had a really cool thing going. And I was new to it as well. It was very supplementary and complementary to what we'd learned at Criste. And of course, we studied history and all these things, Islam too, at least in a historical way. So getting involved with this work was interesting. It was interesting because it was very complementary to it, but it was in a more contemporary sense where it wasn't just history. It was current things going on in the world, but also still attached to the history of everything. You're still getting into the history, but it's very relevant to what's going on today. So I stayed involved with them, and after the in-person retreat, went on a trip with them to the Holy Land. So they have leadership programs, and this is all part of the leadership program called the Philos Leadership Institute. And I did that with them in October of 2022. So I was in Israel for 10 days, and then we were over in the UAE, just meeting with leaders there. And again, I had taken classes and done their in-person retreat, but other than that, like I studied philosophy at Criste, and I was never really keeping up with the Near East space, or even like I didn't really read the news that much. Kind of kept up with it generally in the same way that most people would. You're just, as a student, you're just focused on your school. Right. So getting involved with that in the last 2-3 years has just been challenging. Of course, because of course you're not just me, like I'm working with Protestants, so even for my my Catholic faith, like the Catholic Protestant relations have been good in terms of growing and trying to understand just where they're coming from. But then it goes even bigger with the monotheistic religions, where all of a sudden you're sitting in, I don't know, Bethlehem, you're chatting with this Muslim guy, and you're having conversation. Like, it's not even like, oh yeah, we both believe in Jesus. It's like even bigger. It goes bigger than that. So getting challenged in that way after having grown up in Front Royal and going to school where it was kind of just, of course, it's easy to be complacent, like everyone's Catholic. Not that I hadn't ever met non-Catholics before, but where you're engaging with them on very serious topics too. That was all fascinating. So yeah, it's a kind of convergence of things. And then through all of that, stayed involved with them, did like 2 or 3 internships with them, and eventually came on full time in June of this last year.
Okay.
2023.
Kind of on that note, I feel like there's a lot of debate kind of in the Catholic world about whether you go out and kind of like do outward evangelization and change the world and travel and all of that, or whether you kind of do the other option, which is, there's different names for it, but like a kind of a famous name is the Benedict option, and there's a book about that, and it's more, it's kind of that debate, like do you leave the Shire and go do things, or do you stay and kind of preserve and build up what's already there? And I think that for the most part, it's both. Like, I don't think that everyone should leave, totally. Because if everyone leaves, then
no one's here.
Yeah, the bubble, or whatever you want to call it, isn't growing, and you're not protecting anything. But then also, if you stay and no one leaves, then you're not making the world better. And eventually, depending on where you're at, your little bubble is going to get popped, because the horribleness of the world is going to like encroach on that. So
right.
I'm just curious what your thoughts are. I think it might be different for men and women, like whether women are called to go out and do that, and men, and a lot of it does probably come down to your like particular gifts that you're given. But do you think that, like, kind of for the most part, or maybe a generalization, it is a good idea to leave where you're from and at least go experience things? And that could be something as simple as like an abroad program or like an institute or something, and then come back? Or do you think that it's also okay to just kind of stay where you're at?
I think it's definitely healthy to get that outside experience. Not saying it'd be a damning thing if you didn't, but like it doesn't take too much to actually get out and experience something outside the Shire. And I'm glad you used that experience, or that example, because I always say that too. I always think of the guy at the Green Dragon. Like, we don't care about what goes on beyond our borders. But there's definitely people who have that mentality where just the world's all evil outside there, and we just have to focus on building. So I think it's good to get out of that mindset, kind of the Shire mindset, the bunker mindset. I think there's definitely a lot of people who live that way, and it depends where they're coming from too, because I realize a lot of people are coming from different places where they didn't grow up here, and they came here and they think it's great, and they want to build something here. For me personally, though, it's the other way around, because my parents came here and have built something very beautiful and good. I grew up with a great community here, so I've always felt like I'm a part of the group that has to go out now. Like, we did the retreat, kind of the Benedict option in a way, and I don't think the Benedict option, like Rod Dreher, I think he believes that the Benedict option is retreating so that we can go out again. And I used to think Benedict, like, I never read the book. I still haven't, but I've just heard him speak about it more too. Where he says, yeah, it's like the Benedict option isn't like the end. It's not the ultimate thing. It's kind of a conditional thing. You're doing it so that you can build something good and then share that with the world.
Right.
And I might still be getting him wrong, but that's the way I kind of read it. And that's what I try to do myself.
Yeah, and I feel like another way to look at it is a lot of this is very situational on your, like, based on your state in life, because and again, it could be different for different people, but I think that as a general rule, if you have, 5 kids under 4 somehow, like you've got a ton of little kids, your specific calling might not be to go to New York City and try to do street evangelization.
Right.
Maybe it is, but most likely that stage of your life where you can not know what you're eating the next day and not really know where you're sleeping, and you're just kind of going all out, or maybe you're actually at a nice, like maybe you're just at a good corporate job, but you can go work in politics or something like that. You can do that when you're younger, and then as your responsibility starts to ground you in a way, I feel like that kind of causes you to say, okay, now I've kind of given up on the adventurous side and these different things. And hopefully you've had an experience where you can go, like, it's really important to get a world view, right? If you've never been overseas, if you've never been to Europe, that doesn't mean you can't be successful, but it is a lot harder to like appreciate art, appreciate architecture. And just, there's a lot of things that you're missing if you don't experience the world. And it limits your point of view. And I think that the broader your point of view is, that allows you to be able to start sorting out like the good from the bad, and be able to not just let everything in and just accept it as good, but to actually be able to sort out like what's actually bad and what do we actually need to avoid, and then what's something that's lacking. But they're Protestant, but that's okay. Like we can still be friends with them. I think that like a lot of communities start becoming like, okay, well, we're all Catholics, so like that's all the only people we're talking to.
But it's for self-understanding too. It's not just sort of what's right and wrong. Like I believe it's Chesterton has that analogy of the boy who lives on the side of the hill with the white horse, and he can't see the white horse for what it is, but it's what he's lived on his whole life, and he has to step away from that and move on. And then he turns back and sees where he's lived on. He sees it makes sense now because he can see it from the outside as well, and that gives him this understanding. Like you can't really know what's right and wrong if you don't really know who you are, what is. So knowing where you're coming from too allows you, like coming where you come from, but also seeing that from the outside. Again, where I'm working with Protestants, or I'm like in dialogue with Jewish people or Muslims, all of a sudden you can see like, oh, okay, well, I still disagree, but I can at least see why you struggle with believing what we believe here. I still believe it, but it's easy for me because I've seen it lived out in a very positive way, where a lot of people just have the stereotypes or certain wounds or just complete misunderstanding too. And it's been beautiful to see, like even in small ways with these conversations, where I'm challenged, but I can see it's working on them too, where you're breaking down those stereotypes and actually giving them the real thing, while also honing your understanding of what, in our case, Catholicism is and what that looks like to the outside world. And then that can actually allow you to kind of not interpret it, but show them what it is in a way that they understand.
If you're those conversations, are they like you just go to this place and there are other, like it's almost like an invitation thing, people are invited to this place and then you just go talk with them? Or is it like
it's more just when you're on the ground, like if you're, I don't know, you might just be getting a drink somewhere and you're in Israel, and it's like you just get in a conversation with someone, or maybe even just your tour guide. Like our tour guides are usually, we work with this Jewish tour company, so like we actually took the Dominican House of Studies on a pilgrimage this last August. So we were there with 13 of their seminarians. Well, 3 or 4 of them were priests, the rest were seminarians. But one of the nights I went down with Brother Raphael. He's at the Dominican House of Studies in DC. He's great, love him. But we were just sitting there having a drink with the tour guide, who's Jewish dad. And we just got into like a lot of like very deep topics, but like Brother Raphael was great. And there were points too where like, I guess I won't say it doesn't really matter, but the tour guide was like tearing up because he thought some of the things he was saying were so beautiful. And this tour guide wasn't really religious. There's a lot of more Orthodox and religious Jews, of course, in Israel especially, but they still take certain things seriously, like Shabbat. That's very serious to him. But where he's sitting there with this Dominican, they're just having a beer together, and like Brother Raphael was just so articulate and so understanding and like compassionate, because you're getting into like not just like, oh, is God real, but also just even like moral things, and just hearing those conversations, being a part of those conversations is again challenging, but also so beautiful, where you're starting to see it change for them a little bit. They're being challenged. So yeah, it's more just like in the day to day. It's not really like a forced thing, and I think it'd be weird. It'd be weird if it is forced. It would be kind of more kumbaya, like oh yeah, well that's nice. We all believe in God, like different interpretations of. But most of the time it's just on the street or just grabbing a drink somewhere.
But is it mostly facilitated by like pilgrimages or like going like so you going like the company is like, all right, we're going to Israel for 10 days. And then it's like, okay, and this is where you're going to be for the next 10 days. So this is kind of your, like, I guess where you're going to be like doing this. But is it, I don't know. It just seems.
Well, when we're taking people on trips, it's not like we're going for them to have dialogue. They're going to be meeting with people. But like in the case of the seminarians, it's more of a pilgrimage. So we're getting them to, like, we're taking them to the sites.
Okay.
They're praying. But we're also taking them to, in some cases, like a mosque. There's this one town outside of Jerusalem, and it's like Muslims who are not anti-Jew, like they're just like not anti-Semitic. Like they work with the Jewish people there, and they have a very healthy relationship, and just learning about like, oh, how do you coexist together, things like that. Or you're going to a Shabbat dinner. Like it was one of the nights, Friday night Shabbat, we went to dinner with this Jewish family, and the father was actually a kohanim, a priest. So if the temples were built, he would be one of the priests for it. But he was just like this, like just a very sweet family. But all the brothers, then they're like having these conversations where the seminarians are sitting there with the kids, and they're talking about these things because, like, it's these Israeli Jews. They don't really know that much about Dominicans, so they're sitting there kind of like, oh, why do you
wear this?
Why do you wear this? Like, what are the habits for? Things like that. And then the seminarians too are kind of learning more about Shabbat, and it's like, oh, again, there's so much we can relate on. Of course, there's big major differences, but in terms of just very human things, it's like, okay, there's a lot here.
Okay.
But it's not like we're not facilitating. Like,
right.
We're all going to get together in this room and we're going to talk about Catholic Jewish relations.
No, sure.
Like,
right.
That's where it gets cringy. It's like, no, you just want it to. It'll happen naturally if you're in that space, and everything is just kind of soaked with. I mean, you're just on the streets walking around with Muslims, Sikhs, Jews, all the different Druze, all the different Near Eastern religions. Because it really is a potpourri of. I mean, there's no other place that is the crossroads of so many different things religiously, politically. So those kind of conversations are just going to happen if you're willing to just start a conversation.
Was there a point when you were discerning, like you went to your first retreat or you took your first class and you're like, I'm in, or was there like a gradual sort of like, I'm interested, but I'm hesitant to sort of join on like full time? What was that like? Was there a point that you remember in terms of that?
The leadership program, it's not like you had to pay anything. Again, it's fully funded, so if you stuck with it, they were going to cover you if you were interested. Of course, they want you to be like agree with the mission or at least be persuaded by it. So it's not like I was just like, oh, do I not go to Israel for free? It's like, I'll do that, and it's not like I had to start working for them if you do that. Their thing, it's almost like Kristen, where Kristen's like, no, come and get this formation and then go out into all the different spaces. Philos kind of has that mentality too, where they're like, have these leadership programs and get people to understand this region, people who are connected to the Hebraic roots of their faith, because again, like the whole, it can be dicey. Like a lot of Catholics cringe because it's like, oh, like we come from the Jewish faith. But it's like, well, that's actually what the church teaches too. They, like there's, especially Benedict, John Paul II, they say a lot of stuff on this. So in terms of that, like theology, you're kind of like, oh, I don't know about some of that stuff. But it's not like you have to come to some decision on that right away. And you ultimately wouldn't even have to, as long as you're actually open to learning and just tough conversations and being amenable to all that. So if there was for a job, I definitely would have discerned more, but it was like, this is interesting, this is awesome stuff you're learning, it's challenging, but also fascinating. So I just, there's never any point where I was like, why am I doing this?
There's a book that Peter Criste wrote, I want to say 10 years ago, called Ecumenical Jihad. And the main thesis of the book is that we are called to evangelize all nations, obviously, and that part of that is being able to evangelize the Muslims, because there's other religions, I guess there's maybe more Protestants than Muslims, although I don't think that's true anymore. But he was talking about how like many of them are very anti-Catholic, and so they're kind of the furthest away from the faith in many ways, while still believing in some type of God. But his interpretation, and I don't remember all of the details, but I remember like after reading that being like, wow, he really seems to think that basically all Muslims can have a relationship with Christianity, even if they don't convert, because we have, and he has this list, I think it's 5 or 6 points, maybe more, of like big things that we have in common. And obviously the main thing is like monotheism, and we believe in a God of justice and different things. And part of me is like, I can see if his experience or someone else's experience of going to Palestine or the Holy Land or somewhere in there and meeting all of these, meeting people who are Islam or follow Islam, and they're really open, not to the point that they're going to convert, but they're friendly. I could see how it would be fairly easy to say, like, they're almost like they're our brothers, and we have a lot of the same beliefs. But then you hear about all these stories of, like, for the most part, most Muslims, maybe not U.S. Muslims, but most Muslims are very anti-Catholic and anti-Jew, like more so anti-Jew, and then it seems to be like, okay, that can't be true at all. So do you think that there is a large sect of Islamic believers that actually are either open to Christianity or at least aren't violent? Or do you think the majority of them probably are violent, or maybe they're not actively like committing acts of terrorism, but they wouldn't want to sit down with a Catholic or a Christian or even a Jew?
I mean, American Muslims would be a different case because they do live with us and it's different there. I know, like, my first experiences with Muslims was actually at our house when we have a rental, and they stayed there, and they were it was a very positive experience of Islam. But again, it's hard to say. It's like, well, what is Orthodox Islam? Right. Like, even with Philos, I did this post for them on social media talking about the difference between Islamic martyrdom and Christian martyrdom. It's like, well, outside of like jihad or like terrorists, those cases, like, they don't really have any other kind of radical Islam. So it's hard to say where it's like, okay, the ones who aren't trying to just kill people or kill Christians or Jews or Western Americans or Europeans, are they just not like fulfilling their faith? It's hard to say, because I think a lot of them ultimately, like, they have a conscience and they would be against that. But I know in the Near East there's definitely a lot of indoctrination, or that is kind of what they're taught, but they probably they don't really have that much engagement. I mean, they're taught to hate the West, they're taught to hate Israel and the Jewish people. So in my experience, I've met a lot who are friendly, but that's usually just in America or in Israel itself, ones who are Muslims who are Israeli. So in those cases, it's like you don't talk to the guys who are trying to kill you. So it's hard to say, like, how many of them are out there and how many would actually want to sit down and talk to you. Yeah. I mean, I've had conversations just at like pizza parlors here in Virginia, and is Muslim, and we're just talking about God and things like that. And it's like 11 o'clock at night, right before they're closing. And so I've had almost just as much Muslim engagement here in the United States as I have over in the Near East. And then a lot of the Muslims you'll meet, like, there are ones who are working for peace, but I guess you wouldn't call them like radical Muslims. So it's really hard to say, and that's something I want to get more into, because we have that kind of engagement with them. But for me, just trying to understand them theologically, that's something as of this year that I want to get into more, and just understanding their faith.
Right. Yeah, because it seems like for Catholics, I mean, there's lots of division even just within Catholicism. Then you expand that to Protestantism and trying to understand the different sects of Protestantism. But if you expand even further, I feel like for the most part, I don't know if Catholics really know how to approach Jews, like, because most of them, if they're not Orthodox, they don't know that much about their faith. And then it's like, okay, well, I can teach you about Catholicism, but it's not really a like give and take.
Right.
Or you have people who are just like staunch Orthodox, like really like solid Jews. And that's great that they're that deep in their belief, but it does create a barrier, because you have the whole Old Testament, New Testament, and you're like, all right, well, we kind of believe that we, like, more or less we took over your faith. I mean, that's a little bit harsh, but like that's kind of what happened, right? There's the fulfillment of the Old Covenant, and so from a theological perspective, it's messy, at least just in terms of how to like approach that.
It's I
think that there is a path forward, and I think many people have done it successfully. Whereas with Islam, like, yeah, you read a book like Ecumenical Jihad, and you're like, okay, well, maybe we can go out and convert the ones who aren't Orthodox.
I think there'd have to be a lot of martyrs for that to happen.
Right, but it seems, and maybe that's true in the States. Like, if they come to the States and they want to live peacefully and they're starting schools, maybe they'll never convert, but they probably won't. I don't really see it being very likely that they're going to commit these huge acts of terrorism. Like, they're just happy to be in the States.
Yeah.
I think that's probably probably 99% true.
But
then there's other books, and you're like, like Sword and the Prophet, and there's a lot of other books on Islam, and the thesis of, I think that's by Serge Trifkovic or something, and that entire book is like, basically unless they're open to changing their faith, there's no way you're going to be able to agree with them, because ultimately it's going to come down to a few things, and they're willing to die for those beliefs. And so,
well, and I think the perspective a lot of them get is they see the West and they see like LGBTQ, all that stuff, just like very anti just traditional faith stuff. So I think they would have a respect, like if you're a traditional Catholic, they'd be like, oh, that's not what we learned at all. And this would be, of course, the people who think that the West has just completely lost it. It's
getting there.
That's kind of work of Philos, is like, okay, Judaism, Islam, like there's these big theological things, but we're one of the three monotheistic faiths. Like we take faith and family seriously. Like just again, in terms of like human things, like we have lots of kids, we care about like our religion, like keeping holy days, things like that, celebrating that. There's this weird projection where it's hard to understand Islam because, it's kind of as like, are you one of the people who are just,
are you a good guy or a bad guy? Right.
So it's hard to say, but like that's just something, again, I want to get into more myself.
Well, and as you said, like I've ran into local Muslims, or going to different job sites where you're working at someone's house and they're Muslim, and they make that clear, not to be threatening, but it'll come up pretty easily. I mean, you're not really supposed to talk about
religion. They don't
separate
politics, faith and politics either,
right?
Because for us, we have church and state separation of that,
right?
But they don't have anything like, even if they're like, oh, we don't want to kill you, they're kind of like, well, we want Sharia law to be enforced. If you're a like devout Muslim, you want Sharia law, you want the caliphate, turn the whole world into a caliphate.
Right.
And depending on what strand or which tradition of Islam that is, you might be a little more hardcore about that, and you're willing to kill and blow people up if they don't accept that. But I think most of them would be like, we don't hate you guys, but we want to rule and implement Sharia law.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think in the States, anyone that you meet, maybe they're like secretly really anti-Catholic and anti-America, but I think most of them just want to be here and they're happy doing their thing. And like there's one on 55, and they're constantly having like open houses and like coffee and donuts. Like they just want people from the community to come and like build up their community.
Right.
And that's great.
Yeah.
But then you contrast that with all of the atrocities that you see constantly in the Middle East, where maybe it's a fringe group of Muslims, but you see that constantly, like Hamas and like all of these big groups, and so it's really difficult to separate. Like, okay, how do you claim to be of the same religion and they're radicalized and you're not? Is there a difference, or are you just trying to keep it under wraps because you're here?
Right. Well, this is where it's going to get spicy, though, because everything you see going on in liberal colleges and Ivy League colleges, a lot of these protests are Arab, like Muslims who have come over, and I'm sure they're glad to be here, but they sure act like they don't like us. Like we are the bad guys to them.
Free Palestine.
Yeah, I mean, all of that. Movement, and like you have this weird confluence where like Queers for Palestine, and again, it's because it's all this kind of liberation. It's all these weird values coming together where it's because at that point it's not even really about faith, it's just this whole political agenda. So it's hard to say, because the Muslims here aren't killing people, but they're the ones who are storming the campuses and the streets to like basically supporting Hamas. But it's like, if they're not denying it, they're not rejecting it. I mean, I've gone to some of those, like the pro-Palestine rallies. I went to one at Union Station just to counter rally, like it was just me and one other guy, and
just the two of you.
It was just the two of us. It was the two of us and this huge mob of like pro-Palestinians.
I see. Okay, got it. Yeah.
And some people, I mean, of course, there's people who are just like throwing us the bird, flipping us off, shouting stuff at us. But then you got other people who actually came up and wanted to talk, and they're like, we disagree heavily on a lot of stuff, but they're willing to listen. Yeah. And that's where it's like, okay, that's where we can hopefully try to break some ground and try to understand. of course, we totally disagree overall. Like, we support Israel in this, or they support Palestinian people, but they're kind of like, oh, we reject Hamas. But again, I won't get into all that. It would take up the next 2 hours.
Yeah.
I don't want to upset too many people.
Yeah, something I would encourage people to do if you're interested in the whole conflict, which it gets really, there's so many different takes on it, and there's a lot of different stuff that happened in history, but there was 2 different debates that Ben Shapiro did at Ivy League schools. I think one of them is Harvard, and I want to say it's Harvard and Oxford, but I could be wrong. And he gave like a 30-minute presentation and then did like a Q&A. And some of the people that came up were just like, didn't really know anything and didn't really ask a good question. And he would try to push them on issues, and it was clear that they didn't know. But then you had other people who were genuinely like, I immigrated from there, and I thought that the Jewish presence was bad, but tell me why I'm wrong. And so there were people that were open-minded, but he gives a really good rundown of the history of, the different accords that happened, like the different people that are in charge, how the Jewish area was taken over, all of the different problems that have ensued, and then kind of like where we should be as an American. Like, we don't need to necessarily say that we'll always back Israel and everything, but we are an ally of them, and here's how we should support them, and here's where you should be politically. So, and there's a lot of stuff like that, but I feel like depending on what conservative media you watch, some conservatives are just very like, yeah, we're pro-Israel, but they couldn't really tell you why.
Yeah.
And that's okay. It's not bad to just be like, well, I'm anti-Hamas slaughtering people. Like, that's a good basis, but ultimately if you are going to go out and be that open, especially in social media, you really need to know why you're pro-Israel.
Right. And the
Yeah.
Philos is all about that. Like, we are, when we say we're Zionists, it's not that we like believe in any sort of end times eschatology, or we're trying to get all the Jews back so that like Christ's second coming happens.
Right.
It's because we believe the Jewish people have the right to live in their ancestral homeland. That doesn't mean they do it at the cost of totally screwing over the Palestinians, but within the Palestinians, they have their own problem because Hamas is the problem. It's not Palestinian people in general, but it is Hamas. They're the ones who want to keep fighting. Like, it's in their charter to destroy Israel. Like, how can Israel deal with that when it's like right in its doorstep? So how do you, but they're so enmeshed because you have this strong support within the Palestinian people for Hamas, but they might not technically be Hamas. So they still hate you as an enemy, but they're not Hamas. But so again, for Israel, they've been dealing with this for so many years. It's like, I mean, America, 9/11 happened, and we flew halfway across the world and just blew the crap out of them there. Like, it's, but like, no one ever talks about it because we have the power. We're in, like, Israel can, like, it gets so much critique and it can be critiqued, but it doesn't have the same power that America did. But like, we didn't do, like, we were pretty messy. Like, it wasn't like, but we have this clear conscience because there's not everyone like calling us out on all the time. So yeah, I mean, it all goes back to like, we support Israel doesn't mean we support every policy or that we like who's in office right now, but ultimately we believe the Jewish people have a right to be there and have the state. And if the Palestinian people are willing to work with that, then great. But again, you look at the history with all the different accords and all the peace plans, and there's this strong rejection of wanting to be at peace because, again, there's so many radical groups that have hijacked the Palestinian cause too, through just fear and terrorism, and they have it right. Their mission is to, first of all, destroy the Jewish state and then destroy the West because they want to take over the world. It's like people talk about the Jews being colonialists, but then you look at 7th century, and it's like, wait a minute, like what was happening there? You guys were all the way in Spain, like so it's
and I think it's definitely hard to be well informed because, especially being Catholic, there's so many Catholic politics going on that I think it's very easy to just be like, it's a Middle Eastern conflict. Like, there's always trouble over there. I'm just gonna clock out. And
we have the crazy culture wars here. It's
and I think it is important to kind of focus on issues that are important to you or that you can change, and then whatever those issues are, get involved, and not to just be like, I'm pro Israel and I'm pro life and I'm pro this and I'm pro that, and then you're not really involved in any of those things. Figure out the thing that you're going to be involved in, and if that's just conservative news, fine. If that's just trying to have different people on your podcast to talk about different ideas, fine. Like, but do that thing and don't act like you accept all of those things, because if you do, then you should be able to defend it. And then just get involved where you can, because there's tons of different places that need people to be involved. So,
well, and this goes to your point earlier about like people having, like if you're a father and you have 5 kids, like you're not going to be traveling all over the world. I mean, there's some people who can make that work, but for the most part, it's like you have your responsibility to your family. This work with Philos, I wouldn't have been able to do it. Like I was just working for them part-time. I had like 3 part-time jobs at one point. So I was trying to stick it out because I was like, yeah, I want to stay involved with this mission and learn more and keep engaging with it. But I was at the point where I could do that. But I definitely just like, I don't see a lot of Catholics in this space. I'm like, this is something that I find interesting. I think more people should be involved in it and like trying to engage in the space. Because it's not like the pro-life thing doesn't matter or anything else in the culture wars, but I know there's a lot of good people who are fighting that fight. I'm like, okay, well, here's a front that I've seen that's opened up that needs work. So,
yeah.
Well, I mean, definitely like what you said, being well informed. Like I mean, as much news as I listen to, like just listening to you guys is way more than I know about.
But it's funny because I kind of feel like I'm not that well informed. But then I'm kind of like, well, I kind of take it for granted just because I'm in the space that people like, I start talking about these things and people are like, what are you talking about? I'm like, oh, I guess, okay. I am that far into it that like people are just like, who's that? What is that? Like, I know you guys know who Moss is, or like the big things, but
you'd be surprised what you should have done at that when you went in protest. You should have brought a map that wasn't labeled of the Middle East and just be like, what area are you talking about that Palestine needs to be? And like, see how many people could even pick the area. Now, it is kind of a messy area, so maybe there's some, I don't even know if I could get all of the different areas, but like if you brought a map and they can't distinguish like Palestine, the Holy Land, Egypt, some of these areas that are like, they're all right in the same area.
If they're Arab or they're Muslim, they probably will, but it's going to the campuses and you have these like liberal, tatted, like pink-haired liberals, and it's like, although they just got the slogans and they're for justice, and they're working within like the oppressed class structure, where they see everything through this notion of who's oppressed and who's not, and if you're being oppressed, you're in the clear. You're good. You're the good guy.
Isn't that interesting? Like, I feel like throughout all of human history, and like America's like the prime example of this, is seeking to not be oppressed and to be free and to have freedoms, and then like 200 years later, everyone's trying to be oppressed again, right? And not just like stating we're oppressed and we want to get away from that. It's saying I'm oppressed, I'm happy to stay there, and you're terrible for being the oppressor. Right? You're like, what? And sometimes it's not even direct. It's not like
it's a battle for who's the greater victim, who's the
and I think some of it's legitimate. Like if you know, let's say like a sibling of yours, if you're a black person and you have a sibling that was killed by a cop, I could understand you being really anti-cop because you're directly involved. But that would be true kind of regardless of the color of the cop. You'd just be anti-cop because of the thing that happened to you. But to just be like, well, I'm black and everyone's saying that I'm oppressed, therefore reparation. It's like, what? That? Why are you why don't you seek to not be oppressed? But people are just happy being oppressed, being where they're at. And I mean, really, it's just everyone wants a handout at the end of the day. Yeah. No one wants to work hard. Lazy, everyone's lazy. Yeah. So
it's funny because this is kind of switching tracks here. It's related, but switching tracks. But I've been reading René Girard, and he goes a lot into scapegoating and mimetic conflict. It's a lot of philosophy, but
what time period is he from?
He's 70s, 60s, late 20th century.
Okay.
French thinker. He converted to Catholicism while he was getting involved with this work, but he looks at myth a lot of the time, and he looks at it from this anthropological lens. And I actually just wrote about this on the Substack for the Broken Binnacle. I think the email went out this evening, but I was writing on his work. But he talks about victimhood because what the Gospels do, he was comparing it in Gospels and myth. They reveal kind of the violent nature of mankind and how it's this collective scapegoating where there's this victim, but within the myth that's kind of covered up and the violence against them is justified. Like even with all the Norse or the Greek gods, there's this kind of like this whole play of envies and desires going on between them, but there's always some victim, but the violence against them is justified. Like it might just be a human and it doesn't matter. Like you don't really hear about them. They were just kind of like
chaff.
Yeah. But within the Gospels and with Christ and the crucifixion, it reveals the scapegoating, mimetic, violent nature of man and how the mob violence against like the innocent victim. But post Christ now, there's the reverse now where it's victimhood. Like the world has come to, it's this kind of like ultra bastardized, for lack of a better word, form of Christianity where it only sees victims. Now it takes the gospel and perverts it, where it says, okay, we know that this victimhood status is powerful because there's truth to it. Like, people are oppressed, but now they use it to their advantage, where it says they know that there's this kind of, especially in the West, this sensitivity towards the victim. And it's a Christian thing. We get that from Christianity. It didn't exist before that. It didn't come from any other religious tradition. But now you have this victimhood status that's really come up and just been totally abused. And the problem is there are still there are real victims, but now we have this whole game of boy cried wolf, where everyone's a victim. It's like, well, who are the real victims? But again, no one's informed, so they just see victim and they're like, oh yeah, okay, we'll support that.
Which is really sad, because the biggest example of actually being oppressed and actually being a victim is abortion. Because it's like, what can you think of that's more defenseless, or who can you think of that's more defenseless than an unborn child? No one. Like, you can't. I mean, animals, they're not humans. Like, maybe the elderly, but even with the elderly, like, they at least could put up a fight potentially. Whereas an unborn baby, and no one's on board for that. No one's on board for, and the reason for that is, and I heard a podcast the other day, they were talking about this, actually maybe it was Jordan Peterson, he was talking about part of the victim mentality is this huge rise in worship of the self. Right. There's no sense of identity in another person, or in your family or in your community. It's all about the self. So it's whatever pleases me, whatever makes me feel good, whatever, helps my passions feel fulfilled. And because of that, then it totally makes sense to be pro-choice, because why would you put yourself in a bad spot or put your girlfriend in a bad spot or whatever? Because if your good or her good is higher, then that gets elevated. So it doesn't really matter what the clump of cells is, right? I don't know if it was Jordan Peterson or if this, I think it was a different podcast. There's a Virginia congressman named Nick Freitas, or I think Freitas, and he's famous for being on Instagram and like having a mug and like saying something and then like taking a big sip. He's a really cool guy, but he was on a podcast about like fatherhood, and he was saying part of the reason why men nowadays are so confused about fatherhood is because they don't have an example of it. And he was saying in Christianity, we at least, like, regardless of your relationship with your biological father or a father figure in your life, you at least have God the Father to look at. And so you have an identity in God as being the creator, the protector, the establisher. And he was saying that, lack of God leads to lack of identity. But even if you take God out of the picture, that's why crime rate for men or even women that don't have fathers in the picture is much higher. That's why high school dropouts, I think it's like 85% of the time, don't have a father in the picture. And so, Catholics who don't have a father that practice religion are 3 times more likely to not be Catholic after the age of 16. And it goes on. And he was like, it's just a huge crisis that we don't know like who we are. We're lost. And I think he went on a little tangent about how like women, it's slightly different, but he was like, for men specifically, like in many ways, that's why the military is so helpful and healthy for people, is because you get a sense of identity. I can do this. I'm promoted to this. I can accomplish this. And you have a sense of like, you can set goals and you can be disciplined. And I think that's why people like Jocko Willink, Jordan Peterson, all of these, I mean, even Andrew Tate to a certain degree, even though I don't agree with a lot of his stuff, are popular because they're giving men a direction. And that seems to be something that y'all are trying to do at the Broken Binnacle, which is kind of my poor segue into what is the Broken Binnacle. And yeah, what caused you to start it? And
impressive.
And what is a binnacle? I know I should do ad reads for the Daily Wire.
Guess I'll start with what a binnacle is.
Well, hold on. Before you do that, do either of you know? I know what it is because I listened to a podcast and you explained it in preparation for this one. But do either of you know what a binnacle is?
I definitely know what it is, but I'm going to have Brian flounder.
I also know what it is, but I was hoping that James would flounder. So
okay.
No, I have no idea.
I actually don't know.
It's actually really cool. I really like that you guys picked that.
I've only met one person who knows or who knew what it was, and it was my uncle. So, yeah, we started. Well, I started a Substack because I kind of just discovered Substack, and I was trying to just write more in general. Didn't originally plan to like make it a group thing, but I discovered Substack and created one, and didn't really do much writing on it. And this was only like a month or two, and then I got the idea. It was like, well, I don't really want to be writing by myself. First of all, I want accountability. with an audience, but also with a community of writers where like we're actually building off each other and growing together. But also too, like I'm not like no one's going to really want to listen to me write. So it would be a better idea to actually get a group of young writers where it's like, even if you don't like one of us specifically, there's this cool thing where it's like, oh, it's young Catholic writers who we might not be experts on anything, but we're well educated for the most part, and we're interested in all these different topics. So building that community and allowing that to be kind of the draw, the attraction, these young Catholic guys writing on or not really politics as much, but or at least not in a journalistic way, but writing on faith, culture, religion, all of those things. So we got together for a meeting and we were trying to come up with a name, and we wanted it to be something fragmented, broken, kind of the idea that like, I guess kind of self-deprecating in a way. And we were thinking like the fragmented quill or the pen, like something like that, like righty, something that sounded, I don't know, penmanship-esque, something like that.
Literary.
Yeah, but we also want it to be adventurous. So like we kept kind of coming back to the nautical theme of like being out at sea on an adventure, but also even like the bark of Peter. That's kind of a theme within the church. St. Teresa of Lisieux speaks about like the world is not your ship, or the world is not your home, and it is a ship. But the bark of Peter being like the boat of Peter, and Christ always, he preached from it all the time. So there's this symbolism of the church being the bark of Peter, or with Peter going across the Sea of Galilee in a way, or just across the ocean.
All right, we're changing the podcast name to The Bark of Peter. Right. Pretty cool.
Yeah, no, I've always loved that symbolism too. So that was something that kind of stuck with me. And there's this romanticism to it. I just tend to be romantic when it comes to that. But we wanted to do something like that, something nautical, something broken. And I was just going through nautical terms, and I came across the binnacle, and the alliteration was great. Like I was going through the B listed words, and I looked at what it was, and I was like, huh, that's perfect. So a binnacle is a box by the wheel of the ship with the compass and a light to see it at night. So it's what's guiding you during the night at sea. Right. So it was like this idea of like, we're the broken binnacle because we're the box containing the faith within us, but we still believe in the light of the faith, and the compass is like the compass that we have of having a sense of direction of where we're going, but also it works together with our faith, kind of the faith and reason aspects to it as well. So I brought it up the next meeting, awesome. And all the guys were like, yeah, oh wow, okay, look at it. Like we had spent so long talking about it, and like he was like, I spent 10 minutes looking at nautical terms a little later, and then just told them right away, and everyone was like, there was this kind of hesitation, like, what is a binnacle? But everyone was just like, yeah, that's it. Like, and it worked out. So from there, I just started writing.
How many guys are on the Substack?
6 guys. So at first I pulled on Joe, my twin brother's on it, and then all of them are Christian guys, and you would know them. So Matthew McShirley, John Briggs, John Jacob Eisen, and then Joe, my brother. It was us 5 at first, and I'm not even so sure why I chose those 5 exactly. Like someone like Matthew McShirley, he's so well read, really smart. Same with John Briggs, but also Joe and John. Like I don't know. I guess maybe it was,
you felt like you had.
I like to think it's the Holy Spirit working too, or it's kind of like this. It wasn't even feeling like I had to, but I just knew they would be interested to some degree as well. Like they're some of my other buddies is like, I'm sure they'd love to be a part of this, but they just wouldn't be as engaged. Like they don't really want to write about faith and religion. So ended up being us 5, and at the same time I was doing some stuff with Peter Cermak, who had started his own kind of blog. It wasn't on Substack, but I had written 1 or 2 things for him, but our thing kind of just built up and we had something going. So he came to us and was like, we talked about a few things, and we just decided that he was going to join us. So he came on board, and he's been great because he has the math background at Criste, so he's much more like analytical and like rational. Like Joe and I just didn't like blabber on. So we're just like more romantic, and like it seems like we're just ranting instead of actually giving like a rational thesis and essay. So it's great because we all work together in these different ways. Some of the guys don't, like Peter, he wouldn't really write poetry, but I'm the one who probably writes the most poetry and just more of the creative writing. But I know the actual like essay writing, like writing a thoughtful essay is what I need to get good at as well, because it's something I want to do. But so it's great having someone like Peter Cermak, who's like, he he's been, I think, one of the most like passionate about like just taking it seriously and like being timely on things. And it's changed a little bit. At first, when we first started, it was like, yeah, if you have something you want to post, just
throw it up there.
And we were probably getting like a post every month. And most of it was just poetry. And one of the guys would be like, yeah, I'll write a poem and just throw it up there. And then we started to get a little more serious about it. And we started doing this writing structure where we had to get a post out every week. And we just went through the cycle of all 6 guys, where it's like, okay, there's whatever this month and there's 4 weeks, so line up these 4 guys, and then the next month we just start with the other 2 guys who hadn't written, and then we just restart. So you have 6 months to write an article. It's not that hard.
And you get to do whatever you want.
Yeah, and you could just write on whatever you wanted. But even then, like, people wouldn't post. But we weren't taking ourselves that seriously. It's not like we were like making money off of it. So I wasn't gonna like.
Unlike us, right?
Yeah, I was gonna be whipping the guys for not getting it.
Right.
But we did decide to actually start finding ourselves. If you didn't post by the date, you had to pay the Broken Binnacle a certain amount of money.
So you were raking it in for a few months.
Nice.
Well,
Nice.
John Briggs, I'm gonna out him here. He's like all our money comes from him.
Very well funded.
If you knew him in school, yeah, he's like he would write his papers every paper probably the night before. Didn't matter how long it was, and he got better grades than me.
Nice.
So we started that, and it's been helpful. But again, it's like just unless you're actually like really focused and like taking it seriously, it's going to catch up to you.
Right.
So I've definitely paid the fine a couple of times, and I'm the one who started it. So this year, though, we changed up with the monthly themes. So there's actually a little more structure to it, where you actually have this kind of layout for the next 3 or 4 months. So you can look ahead and be like, okay, our general theme, for example, this month was mythology. Say in 2-3 months' time, it's going to be on some historical topic.
Sure.
You can actually you could start coming across articles, or you can actually start reading on it instead of before it would have been like, oh, I have to write in 3 weeks. Let me just try to come up with something on the spot.
Yeah.
Let me just wait to be inspired. So there's this structure where it gives you some formation, and you're all generally writing on the same topic, so you can kind of work together, and there's a little more engagement. But also gives you the structure and a little bit more of a playing field. There's still freedom because mythology, that's pretty broad. Right. Like Joe just wrote on Jungian psychology within mythology. So it doesn't have to be like, oh, you're picking a mythological text and you have to give some sort of analysis of it.
Yeah.
It can be pretty broad.
But then your reader feels like you're also like growing within like that month.
Right, but also that month there's this consistent theme where it's not just like this Monday you're reading about identity politics, and the next one you're reading about
mythology.
Yeah, mythology, something like that.
Yeah,
like it's
Math
I think
and mythology.
Who knows? Maybe some people like that, where it was like you just don't know what you're gonna get.
Right.
But I think it's still pretty broad. You still don't really know what you're gonna get. Like the topics are pretty diverse still, even after this first month.
Do you kind of have? So I was looking at it earlier, and maybe you're like shying away from this, but it looked like you had several different categories. I think one of them is the flying jib, and you've got like different nautical themes, which point aside is cool just to divide it up in different ways. But do you try to because obviously anyone who's signed up for the Substack is going to get the email, so when they click on it, it's just going to redirect them to the article, so they'll be able to read it either way. But for people searching, if they kind of find obviously if they like one of you as an author, they can search your name and just pull up your articles.
Right.
But if they like a particular type of writing, is it, because I didn't really click on it and look into it enough to know how it's categorized. Like, do you have like a poetry section and then like creative writing and then like more book analysis type things? Is that how it's divided, or is it more arbitrary?
That one's definitely more for us to just for our own internal structure as well. And then also just optically, it's nice for people to be like, oh, this is the theology section, this is the philosophy and history section. But it's funny that you're bringing that up, because we're changing that around as of this. Like with the monthly themes, we're just going to have the Broken Binnacle, kind of that general Substack, and then different tabs. We'll keep like the poetry and creative writing one, which is the flying jib. And of course, we tried to choose like parts of the ship that were appropriate for whatever it was. The mizzen mast is the mast that you would go on to look behind the ship. So that was philosophy, history. We were joking around for the longest time about doing something with the poop deck. where it'd be, of course, whatever, like
Just political articles, yeah. The
and
anchor is just topics that drag you down.
Right.
Make you depressed.
Right.
Pop culture.
Yeah. But we're starting to break away from that now. So we still have an internal structure, again, with themes, and then it's also going to always be revolving. This is kind of some behind the scenes stuff, but like it doesn't really matter if people know or not. It's more just for us to have that structure where you're rotating between literature, history, philosophy, and theology. So it's going to rotate within like the themes itself. There's this overarching structure where every month is based, like there's this meta theme kind of within it. So mythology was supposed to be like literature. This next month is history. So spoiler, it's going to be on the Reformation. We'll probably lose all our Protestant subscribers. But, I feel like if they stuck with us this long, they know what to expect.
With work at the I'm sorry,
Philos.
Philos. Sorry, I messed it up for you.
I was
forever.
saying the other one. Was that a like a spark to start this? Like all that conversation or all that stuff you were studying, or was it kind of like you had these two ideas, you were working within this, and then you're like, I want to write, and it just so happened that all that stuff kind of came together? Or
they were separate.
Okay.
So I started to get involved with Philos before I started it. Okay. So it would have been the fall of 2021, and then I started the Substack in early 2022, again, about 2 years ago.
Okay.
Those were definitely separate things. Like, I was getting involved with Philos, but that was all new. The Substack, again, I think I mentioned this briefly earlier, where it was started because post Criste it was like, okay, it's great, we got this education, but
right.
It's not just a one and done thing. It's a whole process. It's the beginning of your journey in the intellectual life, but also just through your faith seeking, understanding, all of that.
You don't want to stop either. So
and I've actually tried to I've been tempted to write about stuff related to my work, but we want the Substack to be like, we don't really want to get into like culture wars or like super political kind of intensive stuff. Like, we want it to be more like, again, just building something good where people can just kind of get away from all that and like read an interesting article on some historical thing or philosophy or a poem. It's not like we won't talk about like political theory, but it's never going to be like, oh, did you see what Trump said today? Or the latest thing on the Hill, or did you see this drag show that happened? Like, we've never write on anything like that, because we want it to be this kind of oasis for people to actually just enjoy something good. Culture, faith, like it's, again, it goes to kind of like even microcosm of what you're asking about the Benedict adoption. It's like, we're trying to just build something good here. Like, we're not trying to like go fight the culture wars right now. We're trying to just build something good, true, and beautiful, and allow that to draw people. And a lot of it is also evangelical, because just in our age, like trying to take advantage of media, Substack has just become a lot bigger these days. So trying to just give a defense for the hope that's within us as well. Sure, you're not like writing on theology per se, but people are like, I know a lot of the subscribers, and many of them are Protestant just because I know them personally, and they enjoy it, and it's helped them too. Like, I've had even people who I didn't know like reach out because they read or followed the Substack, and they were kind of like, hey, like, I'd love to like connect with you, just because like I found your Substack through social media, because again, we're on Instagram or LinkedIn, all of those. So they find it through that, and then they find the writing, and they like it. And then like, I've met people who found us just online, and I've met them in person. So that's been beautiful to see, just even on the evangelical side of being able to express our faith. And it's like, oh, okay, it's actually doing something for the church too. It is kind of an apostolate.
Yeah. I feel like I would have a really hard time separating things that are like, that both interest me and that aren't, not that you aren't writing about things that are like controversial, because clearly you're bringing up like if you're talking about a certain philosophy, like some people might believe that philosophy or parts of that philosophy, so it is controversial in that way. But you're not saying like you were saying, you're not really doing like clickbaity news. It's more of like overarching, like, this is what Carl Jung thought, this is what Dostoevsky thought, this is what, and you're not saying, and here's how it applies to everyday things now, because you can see that Trump, you're not doing that. But do you find yourself having a hard time separating those things? Because I think that I would start writing about something that interests me, like a painting or something. Like, okay, this painting is really cool. Why is this painting cool? You go to the history of the painting and whatever. But then I feel like immediately my mind would be like, how is this applicable to every day? Well, we have a downfall. No one knows what art is, and you go into this rant of like modern art sucks, right? And maybe that's not a bad thing, but then you start getting controversial there. So how do you like present things that are true without getting into like things that are maybe have more consequences, right? Like, how do you just present? I guess something that kind of came to mind is like a really easy thing to write on would be like JP2's letter to artists. Like, this is artists, for anyone who's like interested in the arts, whether you're an actor or painter or writer. Here's a letter. Here's some like, quotes from it, and you could just present it as that.
Right.
And I feel like that's kind of what you guys are doing. And I feel like, but for the writer, I think the tendency would be to say, why hasn't Pope Francis said anything about this? Or like, and it immediately kind of gets political. So how do you like step back from that and try to just like pick a good topic and keep it non-controversial in that way?
It's a good question. It's not like I wouldn't say intentionally trying to do that. Like every time I'm writing an article, it's like, how do I not get like hot topic kind of
like clickbaity?
Yeah. I think it's just one is just being well researched, but also just like being interested in it because it's just an edifying topic, not because you're trying to like prove a point. Like again, I've written like it's funny to bring up modern art because there was one point where some of the articles we wrote were on like modern art, but it's not like we're just trashing modern art. It's kind of like, okay, what are the goods in it that we can see? Kind of trying to again wrestle with it as opposed to just completely like rejecting it outright and being like, there's a reason people are drawn to it. Why is that? So I think it's just looking at it from, we're not academic, but just like, we actually like, we care about our faith and there's things we are very convicted by, but also like, we're not trying to like change the world by saying that modern art sucks. And first of all, it's not like, we're just kind of preaching the choir, like especially like at the point we're at. It's not like there's no need for us to like rant against something because everyone would be like, yeah, we already agree with that. Like, what do you?
Yeah. Do you think that there's a benefit to preaching to the choir? One thing that Matt Walsh said, it was a while ago, but he made this really funny point. Someone made a comment. They're like, Matt, you have to stop talking about like the trans issue. You're preaching to the choir. And he was like, well, what do you think that saying even means? Like, it literally means like you're the priest or the preacher preaching to the choir. Of course they know these things, but it's your job to reiterate it and keep them strong. So do you think that there's like a benefit to preaching to the choir, like to kind of remind people of
well, that's what I think. If you're actually in the culture war, it's like, you need to actually be like getting the troops, like they've heard these kind of speeches before, but they need the leaders, the people they look to actually like pump them up. But what we're doing isn't that. Like, it is more just trying to create something beautiful, and that will draw people to it, as opposed to like just trying to like cram it down people's throats and being like, listen to us, we're right about this. Just trying to come from it again with a more just intellectually humble approach, where it's like, if we got into culture wars, yes, I would be very like argumentative about this stuff, but like we're for the most part staying on topics that it doesn't really matter. Like, it's not like we're writing on like in vitro fertilization or something again that's culture wars. It's like I'm not gonna be shoving something down your throat because I'm writing on like this one paragraph within Norse mythology and like therefore we should I don't know, throw all the trans people in prison or something, like something just super radical and political. It's like even if say I wrote, like, I've been getting into the Civil War lately, I've been like reading about Thomas Jackson, things like that, things where it's like, oh, that's not like PC, like where you're kind of learning like the Civil War, everything's about like just slavery. It's like, well, no, it wasn't. But like, we would try to say, if I was writing on Jackson, it's like, okay, I wouldn't make it like the Civil War wasn't about slavery. I'd be like, well, that's a big overarching thing, but I'm going to talk about the life of Jackson,
right?
And
here's
focus on that.
What he thought,
right? Here's what he thought, and like here's his story, and it's going to play into that. But it's not like I'm saying like, see, the Civil War wasn't about slavery, or the Civil War was only about slavery. It's just like, I'm talking about Thomas Jackson, like. It's easy to kind of just get sucked into these, like, again, the binary extremes between any topic, because I think that's the problem with so much of writing and the political writing that you guys like. you have to pick a side. You have to pick something. It's like,
it's so divisive.
No, I just want to, like, I'm going to talk about this thing, or like, you don't have to have some political twist to it. You can just be like, here's my thought on it, and it doesn't have to be like, and here's why you should vote Republican at the end of it.
There's no ulterior motive for you, which is great, because I think what you just said about, like, we're just going to write on something that's true and objective, and what are people attracted to?
Well, it doesn't even have to be objective. It's kind of just like, like, even us guys among the Broken Binnacle might disagree about it. Like, what I was writing about with Gerard, like, Peter Shermack takes a lot of, like, he's like, nah, I don't agree with that. And I'm kind of like, I think Gerard has something there. So it's like, of course we're going to disagree on that, but, like, it's not like
this isn't like papal infallibility or something.
Exactly. Right. We're not writing on something like that where it's we're in this playing field where we have space and flexibility. And I think, again, it's just generally, like, our goal isn't to convince people to vote Republican or vote Democrat. The goal is to just write an edifying article where they can walk away and be like, oh, wow, I learned something that was, like, good for my soul, or, like, it doesn't even have to be like something spiritual, but, like, you're learning about this cool story within history, or could have been a poem, or it could have been some sort of spiritual exegesis on the Song of Songs, something like that.
Yeah. And it's interesting to think about the different roles, because, like, you definitely need people like hosts at the Daily Wire, people on Fox News, senators, congressmen, whatever, going and saying this particular border policy is good for X reason or bad for X reason. But you also need people who are just like, yeah, Tolkien is great, and, like, here's why. And does that really play a big part in the border policy? Not really. Right. But if that isn't your calling, is to be involved in that, the ability to kind of, I think it's really good to be able to, like, zoom out and let go of that and see the bigger picture and be like, what are some of, like, the really deep human themes, things that have to do with, like, prudence or human nature, fallen human nature, that we see in this literary work, or that we see in this poem or this song. And I think that, sadly, there's not many places nowadays or organizations that do that, right? Because, like you were saying, everyone needs to pick a side, and you're not going to pick the side of evil and pro-abortion and pro this and pro that. So you're going to be kind of the counterculture, and we need to bring back the Latin Mass, and and those things are good depending on your role.
Right, but you're not doing it because you think that, like, it might be more just because, like, you think you're kind of weaponizing the Latin Mass. Then it's kind of like, well, did you do, like, were you actually that much of a Latin Mass person before, or is it just kind of like, no, it's actually just going to save the culture? It's like, whoa, like that's again the wrong mindset, right? It's just this reactionary phase, and it's hard not to do that. Like, it's. I think most of us, that's our first reaction is...
And I think that, like, kind of on the other side, I think there's also tons of people who aren't reactionary enough, like Catholics specifically, who are just like, well, that's what the diocese said, and well, that's what... And it's like, maybe at the end of the day, you aren't actually going to do anything.
I'd rather be passionate,
but, like,
wrong
you should be, like, on top of it,
Yeah.
like, write your bishop and, like, talk to the priests and talk to people in your community and start doing things, be active, and, like, act like you care. You know, this is an important part of life, but I think kind of on the flip side, it is, I think, much healthier, like, mentally, to be able to just, like, pick up a good book and read it, or watch a TV show or watch a movie. And even if it wasn't perfect, just to be able to say, like, there was a lot of good in that, and then, like, be good with it, and not have to be, like, the critic all the time. Like, well, there was this, like, they said one bad word, so I'm not...
Right.
It's like, okay, well...
But it's just even, like...
Take it with a grain of salt.
Going back to the things that make us all human, it's like, okay, we all... Like, we can appreciate that. And a goal of ours, of course, would be, like, introduce these things to people who maybe haven't been introduced to them before and pull them in. But, again, because we're trying to, like, introduce something that is true, good, and beautiful. Like, it's so overused, but it's true. It's just, like, trying to do it that way. And most people, when they read our stuff, it's like they can probably guess, like, the way we'd vote if you're reading us. But, like, we're not going to force that down people's throat, because that doesn't really matter for what we're doing here. It's like, we're writing on, hey, here's this, like, this great essay I found by this great Catholic thinker, and it's like, you just kind of bring that out and flush it out, and it's this, like, beautiful thing on, again, like something like Joseph Pieper, and you're talking about leisure. Yeah. And people are like, oh, I've never read him, and I've never had a Catholic education or whatever, but yeah, that's beautiful. That's awesome. Yeah, so I think it's just coming from that approach, just starting with like kind of ground zero, building up, not trying to man the stations, because there's a time and place for that. But again, it's also trying to create something good.
Yeah. And it does seem like you're doing a good job of trying to, without being overly controversial, initiate conversation. Even if maybe they're emailing you and asking you about an article, but hopefully people are reading it and it gives them something to think about. And if you're making people think about the thing that they're reading, whether they disagree or not, like that's a good thing. If you can have someone read a poem, you're like, huh, yeah, I agree with that. Like I totally get what he's trying to say and trying to convey. That's a really good thing. And because I think we're all so programmed to like, if it's longer than a 30-second video, we can't watch it. And if it's not flashy and doesn't have good sound, we can't watch it. And it's like just to be able to let go of that and maybe just like have an open mind so that you can learn something new. And then if you disagree with it, you're welcome to reach out to the editor, or you're welcome to, but hopefully it spurs conversation, because that's what conversion is about, right? Conversion is a conversation. Conversion isn't just, here's a principle, believe it. Right? That's never going to convert everyone. That's why Christ taught in parables,
Also, people just work through processes. It is walking with people, because like you might give a perfectly rational and like cogent argument for the faith.
Yeah.
And they might be like, okay, rationally I get that, but like there's so much more than just rational, like, oh, the argument made sense, I'm going to be Catholic now. It's like, there's culture, like it's a whole confluence of things. Like I love John Henry Newman, and I read his biography, The Apologia, and that where it's like he kind of knew Catholicism was true way before he converted, but it was like, and the same was with Chesterton as well. He like rationally he's kind of like, yeah, I kind of believe it's true, but there's this whole cultural force you have to get at, just all the different things in your life where it's like, again, it's hard to make that leap, even when you kind of rationally come to the point. There's still the rest of the man that has to go along with it and deal with all those things. So trying to get people where it's like, okay, yeah, we might rationally convince them, but also trying to evoke something from them, because we're trying to write on something beautiful. So it doesn't even have to like rationally convince them, but it starts to soften them to what we're convicted about and the truth of what we believe as well.
Is there a kind of like a larger mission that you have in mind for the Broken Binnacle? I know that you've done a couple of like, I don't know if you call them Bourbon and Binnacle events. I think that's what it's called.
Yeah.
Where you like invite other people to come in. Is that an event where you're just trying to like promote the Substack, or is that like we're looking for more writers? We want to branch out and like get into other things and have more people write, or is that just to encourage people to start their own Substack? Like what does that look like?
The Substack itself is kind of the heart of it and like the foundation. But it's not really to like get more writers. If people want to be like write a guest essay, then that'd be great. But like us, the guys who started it, like we're trying to do something with each other as well. Where it is kind of this community, this more intimate community where we're engaging these ideas, and like we wouldn't just like invite a bunch of people in and like have a bunch of writers, because then you kind of lose some of the identity. Like you do want to keep it small enough. It's like Criste, there's a reason they want to stay small, because you can keep this like clear identity, this tight knit community. So even if among us 6 writers, like we wouldn't want to have 30 writers, then it's like maybe there's a certain point where we'd want to branch out and start something like that. But where we are right now, we're just not at that point. So something like the Bourbon with the Binnacle, I guess I should give them some background on that. It's basically just, we call it Bourbon with the Binnacle, and it's a guy's event. First of all, it's 6 guys who run the Broken Binnacle, so it's just easy for us to minister to the male community. But everyone comes and has to have a poem ready, or a speech or something. But we also send out a short reading that people have to do. So it could be on something with an education, or it could be something more literary. But you get together and there's bourbon, like just.
Of course.
We have it a undisclosed location, and we just hang out for a little bit, have some drinks, chat, and then we get together, and it's usually like no more than 20 to 25 guys. It's something we like to build out, but you get together and we talk about the article we sent out. We kind of read through it and discuss it for 30 minutes. Then we take a little break, and then everyone gets back together, and everyone has to get up and recite a poem. You don't have to memorize it. Like, it's very, like, there's not a lot of commitment.
And it's not, do you require people to write a poem, or you just need to
you
find
can do
a
either,
poem?
but they at least just have to find a poem and recite it. Like, it can be 3 lines. Like, it doesn't have to be a long poem. But, like, you have to get up and recite a poem.
The sunset.
Right. Like, is it,
The Red
is
Wagon.
it yeah. Someone actually did that once. Yeah.
I don't think that's a poem, but that's another that's a topic for another time.
Yeah, not my taste. But everyone there has to get up, stand in front of everyone, and recite a poem.
Okay.
Or
is it a wheelbarrow? I forget.
The Red Wheelbarrow or something like that.
Yeah.
We all know what you're talking about. Walt
Mrs.
Whitman,
Nixon
I
had it in
think.
her class.
Yeah. I think it's imagism. That's the
Right.
poetry that it's called.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but the goal of it is to, sure, we can write about culture, but it doesn't really mean anything if we're not trying to live it out.
Yeah.
So the goal is to, it doesn't even have to be people who are like, oh yes, I'm going to go read poetry. But it's like, okay, like a bunch of guys get together and it's just like, we have this whole inheritance from, especially the Western culture and like all of that. A lot of these people have already read, I don't know, Brideshead and Crime and Punishment, but like, it's also trying to live that out where it's like, there is something evocative. Poetry has to be read, and like, it is cool where like, it's just a bunch of guys getting together and you're drinking, smoking, and reading poetry, and like, there doesn't have to be much more to that. Like, it's not like you're like, all right, now let's go take over the world. It's kind of just like, we're just doing something good here, and it's building community, but in a positive way where it's like, especially today, most guys get together and they're just watching a football game or just playing video games. It's like, read poetry, like, gay kind of thing. But it's like, no, like it's some good stuff. Like, it's very like, but a lot of people, like, they still might not be into it. But it's like, they love the community aspect of it. So it's like, okay, they come and they'll grudgingly get up and mumble their poem and then sit down. But it's like, people enjoy it. So it's good. So we'd like to expand on that and actually have more in-person events. So that's more of just closed. It's personal invite because it's just, we want it to be more intimate and only guys, because guys are going to be a little more shy about getting up and reciting a poem if there's a woman there. Or,
I wrote it about the girl that's here,
Right.
so everyone maybe walk out.
But we would love to do, like, we're not just trying to be a men's club either. We want to do, once we get this writing down a little more, we'd like to actually have events where we have speakers come and it's open to the public, and it's an hour or two and we have the speaker and some drinks and snacks, and again, it's community, but you're also trying to like elevate it to a certain point where you're having these discussions and the speaker is talking about something on culture or education, or again, just trying to raise and elevate the mind and the soul in a way that you're doing it with people as well. Because I mean, hopefully we're inspiring people to actually get into writing and reading more just by them following the Substack, but we also want it to be a lived experience where we're talking about these things together and hearing wiser people than us talk. So,
do you find that having a drink and having a smoke facilitates the ability? Because I think if I got together with a group of guys, even if I thought they were all great, like I wasn't like, oh, they're a little bit like, I feel like they're a little kind of like a literary snob, and I'm not sure if I like this group. If I thought they were all really solid, I think I would still feel a little bit uncomfortable. Like, we're going to get together and read especially if it's poetry. Like if it was like an essay, or maybe one person was like leading like a book study or a Bible study, it'd be different. But do you find that people, like, it sounds dumb, but I feel like the first thing I think of in my mind is like, you kind of do something manly, and then whatever else you do after that, you kind of don't even think about it.
Right.
Like, yeah, the idea of getting together and reading poetry with guys doesn't sound that manly. But if you have a cigar in your hand and you're like on your second glass of whiskey, reading a poem is like, yeah, this is what we do. Get behind it, guys. You know.
And if it's a good poem, people are like sitting there and it's like, wow, that was good. And but half the time we're just goofing off too. It doesn't have to be like, okay, guys, listen.
Yeah.
Jake's gonna go. Like,
everyone clap.
It's kind of like, okay, shut up, Peter. You're going next. Like, get up and give us something. Like, it's just like,
sure.
It's also just like don't be so prideful. Like, just it doesn't matter. Like, it's not a big deal. Like, you might be reciting a really stupid poem, but there's also just a lot of good poems. So like, someone gets up and they recite a poem and everyone's like, hell yeah, that was awesome. Like, it could be like G.K. Chesterton's poem about Don Juan of Austria and the Battle of Lepanto, and it's like, all right,
well done.
Yeah.
There's this one poem that I needed to do some more research on, but Matt Fradd read it on his podcast a couple times, and I can't remember the title of it, which I can remember some of the lyrics, and so I've tried to search those and I can't find it, but it's essentially like about how you'll search the whole world for meaning, you can conquer lands, all this stuff, but really like the best feeling is coming home, like kissing your wife, lighting up a pipe and reading a good book, or something to that extent. And it was this really interesting poem where it's one of those poems where you almost don't realize it's poetry, even though there's rhyming words,
right?
Because it doesn't feel forced. It's just like, this is what I did, and this is what, like, life is good. And it was just this really wholesome poem, and I was like, yeah, I like poems like that. But then you read other poems, and you're like, ugh, this
right, the red wheelbarrow,
so much alliteration.
Or whatever.
Yeah, right. Yeah, anything by Chesterton. Yeah, no, that's interesting, and I think that's unfortunately, I think that's a problem that society, like our modern society, has, especially with men, is that I think men are too self-conscious about what they enjoy. Like, they might like a movie or a show or a book, but they wouldn't like admit that.
Right.
But they probably like it for like very concrete reasons. Like, no, there's like a strong male role model, or like this poem actually really struck me, like,
right,
in whatever way, but you don't really want to admit that. So to be able to have a group of guys get together and be like, huh, but also poetry, and it's not a really weird, nerdy, like academic thing,
right?
That's a really cool balance to find, and I'm glad you guys have found that.
Yeah, it's something we would love to keep going. Yeah, what also just breaks down, again, because you spoke earlier about kind of the masculinity crisis with this lack of fatherhood. It's like people are offered either kind of the soy boy, like TikTok version, or kind of just the gym bro, like whey protein, like, and you just can't express any feeling. It's like,
get it. Yeah.
No, like, you can read a poem and like it can be like this emotional thing, but it's not this like weepy kind of stuff. It's like, no, like, you have to feel that passion, because there's this like right ordering of our passions, and there's something about poetry that like takes you kind of on that and shows you a way of actually forming those passions towards a good end. Again, because if you're reading a poem about, like, I love reading poems by World War I and World War II poets. Oh, yeah. It's like these guys who have kind of gone through the trenches and gone through some of the craziest stuff, and they're writing poems about it. It's like, that's not really, like, you're not going to have like soy boy like vibes from that. It's like, okay, this is like teaching me something about manhood in these challenging times. Like, meanwhile, I'm sitting here and I had my desk job all day. Like, I don't think reading this poem is like making me a soy boy, or a terrible term to use, but I think it's just the West too has become so into, like, it's either this kind of like throw it to the winds, everything goes, or very intellectual and rigorous. It's like there's something about poetry where it meets both those lines. It's like, no, it's this right ordering of the passions, and it's a very healthy thing to experience.
I don't think I mentioned this on the podcast, but I remember talking to someone about this, how, and I don't necessarily have a bad taste of Jocko in my mouth at all, but I used him as an example of, like, he's like the ultimate, like, you know, ex-Navy SEAL, leadership, work out every day. Doesn't matter if you went to bed at 3, get up at 4, like, you know, crunch time. And then you have Andrew Tate, who's like kind of that way, but much more like kind of power focused. And I was like, and Jordan Peterson is very much in the middle, where he's not posting things about working out. I mean, granted, he's older and things like that, but he's like, he
I'm
is
doing my cold plunge now.
Hopefully someone can pull me out. But he's this interesting balance of, like, he's very well read, very knowledgeable, could beat pretty much anyone in a debate, but is very obviously hardcore. Like, he's not just like an overweight, like, academic sitting at a computer just like reposting things on Twitter. Like, that's not. And so it's interesting to have that, like, you see how guys are drawn to all three of them, but like Jocko doesn't really bring up faith. He doesn't really bring up theology, even though I think he probably could, as I have no doubt that he's really smart. And he has a lot of good principles, and I think if he talked to someone who brought up Catholic principles, he'd probably agree with a lot of them. But then Andrew Tate, who's just very like, yeah, well, if you can make money on OnlyFans, you might as well, because he's like so overly pro-capitalist that it's like that it's embarrassing. But it's so cool to have, like, Jordan Peterson, or there's other people that are like in the middle, where you're like, you can read a poem and I don't think less of you, but I think that's because you've shown yourself to be a man, and you've shown yourself to be well read, and you've shown yourself to be a good debater in other situations. And I think that you kind of almost have to like earn that, right? Like, if you're a podcaster, if you're like an influencer online, you can't just start posting like things of you reading G.K. Chesterton. That's great, but like, you also have to like show people that like it's more than that. There's more. It's not just me picking a person or an ideology to get behind, and then all of a sudden I'm this person, right?
Right.
And with Jordan Peterson, obviously, he has so much content that it's like you could look up anything and realize how incredibly smart he is and how well read he is. But
well, because he's thought about it in his own terms. To kind of, it's
Yeah.
not like, oh, every time he talks about it, it's always kind of like, well, Young says, or like, I mean, even a lot of Catholics would be like, well, St. Thomas Aquinas says. It's like, St. Thomas Aquinas is great, but have you thought about it with your own brain? Like, it's not just like referring to everything. Like, so yeah, but he has that approach where it's like, he's very well read, and he's read all these things, but he doesn't just attach himself to one of those. So I'm curious with this, where you guys want it to go, because I know, I mean, you just love to pick people's brains, but is there an end goal that you guys like? Is
money.
What's the
money's the
right?
goal.
Well, aren't you just doing OnlyFans then?
That's a great question. I'd love to answer that. There's a few reasons why I'm not.
That's right. Editing that out.
No, we won't edit that out. This is
That
all part
is
of the charm.
staying. That is staying.
Yeah, so I think... So it's interesting because I feel like the reason that we started this is very similar to the reason that y'all started the Substack.
Mark has to say something too at some point. So.
Okay, yeah. No, we'll question Mark later.
Yeah.
Mark, how are you doing? No.
Our second guest for this evening is
Yeah, one of our co-hosts.
Unreal.
So, yeah, I mean, and I'll let both of you maybe elaborate on this a little bit more than I can, but I think like really the main reason is that we would hang out and have drinks, have a couple cigars, hang out, and like just talk about stuff, and we would never. We actually may have benefited from saying we're going to talk about this like essay or this book, but none of us were organized enough, and we were all in college, and so we didn't really have time for that.
Right.
But I think after that, we just kind of missed. Like, we just missed talking to people, and then I realized that I would invite a bunch of guys over, but then I would invite, like, Mr. Brown, or I would invite, like, Mrs. Hickson, or something, and then it would end up kind of being a group of us just being like, so why did you do that, or where did you go to graduate school, and you're kind of just drawn to the wisdom of that person,
right?
And I was like, I don't really want to stop doing that, and we don't have to, we don't really have to record it to do that. I can... You talk to anyone. I do. If people come over and I'm interested in them, I'll just talk to them.
You're saying you would invite James Scannick to just come hang out?
Well, no, not James, but that's a different story.
James.
Yeah, some people I just don't like on a personal level, but I just don't trust him to do my tile. It's the whole thing. Not my tile guy.
James, if you're listening to this,
let's be real. James is not going to listen to this. I doubt. I told him. I sent him his podcast, and I was like, don't worry, like, if you listen to it, don't be self-critical. And then I was like, don't worry, none of us have listened to it either.
Right. None of us.
No, but I think that we just were like, we don't want to stop asking questions and talking to people.
Yeah.
And if it becomes a big thing where we can get really big guests on and it becomes popular, that'd be great, because the bigger the guest, at least ideally, the more interesting they are, the more people you can affect. You can talk with different organizations. And if not, then it's just people from the community, and it's really just people from the community that are listening to it anyway. So...
But it's also like, you don't want to just assume that those people wouldn't have an interesting story, because like you just don't know how well you even know them, because they could have this crazy life. It's kind of like,
and that's happened.
And I had this crazy life, and then I decided I want to go live in Front Royal because great Catholic community.
Yeah, and depending on the person, I mean, some people that we've had on I know pretty well, so I kind of know what to expect. But other people, they come on and they're like, yeah, I mean, I wasn't Catholic for years, and you're like, wait, what? Like,
right.
And I maybe that would have come up in conversation, but if it's someone you've known most of your life and they come over, you're just going to ask about their job and ask how things are going. So at least for me, I just decided I think we need to make it more official, because something about recording, it's very similar to like it's all about being intentional, right? Having a drink, having a smoke, setting a time to do something. Maybe you read an essay, whatever. It kind of forces you to say, this is what we're going to be talking about. And it makes you not just accept like, we're just hanging out.
It's also conducive to certain conversations and questions that you wouldn't ask if you you just had someone random over and kind of like, but like it's like, we're here and we're doing a podcast, but like, so there's certain things that I'm going to ask you about.
Yeah.
That you wouldn't ask about.
And it feels more normal, because if we're recording and I say, so tell me about this, in person, you might be like, it's kind of a weird thing to say. Like, we haven't really gone, like, what are the formalities? Whereas on an episode, it's like, yeah, he's interviewing me. Like, that's what he's going to say. But, I mean, I think ultimately our goal is just to keep it really conversational, interview as much as we need to, but just to keep the conversation flowing, drinks are always a part of that.
Mm-hmm.
Someday I'd like to have a studio where we could smoke, because I think that would be even better.
That would be awesome.
Like light up a pipe. But yeah, and I think at least I really pushed for, I don't think there was much pushback, but I pushed for long format, because it's like if we have someone on for half an hour, we'd probably get most of the same content that you're telling us.
Right.
But it's going to be in a distilled form, and most podcasts that do that, unless it's a debate podcast or a really quick like political podcast, it sounds forced, and it doesn't sound like the host is actually interested.
Right.
Whereas if you have a long format, like I'm not going to talk, I don't invite people on that I am not interested in talking to, because I don't want to waste 3 hours of my time. It's actually going to be 4 hours, so just buckle up. No, but I don't want to waste time with someone I'm not interested in. So. Yeah,
I'm sitting here like, why am I?
That's the long version.
Well,
do you guys want to comment?
I was walking by and Anthony asked me to come in, so I think
Brian's like, I've never done this before.
I've never been a part of this.
It's actually the first time we've all been together in a while.
Yeah,
because we keep you guys keep alternating,
getting sick.
Coming.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Well,
Yeah.
Well, as
So-
you can tell, I'm the talker of the three.
Right.
So I really just need to get it out.
It's kind of a disease.
Right.
No, I mean I'm doing this because I'm selfish. Anthony just wants to talk to people. I'm just like, I want to get to know, like I want to be around these two, especially, just very good men. And not anymore.
You ruined it, guys.
Yeah, and every guest that Anthony's able to get is like top tier, except for tonight for some reason.
Yeah,
Whiskey,
I'm glad you said
you're
that.
not drinking that. So.
Well, you're one of the guests, though, Mark.
Yeah, we're not.
Can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, for sure. I think that I've always been an introvert and very quiet, and so like being able to be in this and chirp in where I can, but also just listen to, like, I mean, I think my favorite one that we had was James Iskanic, because just being able to listen to his story, but also like ask questions, and it was in the morning, so I had energy. But like,
So you're a morning person?
yeah,
Okay.
that is like, that's a blessing to be able to just sort of sit back and listen to people have these excellent conversations with each other, but also chime in where I can.
Right. What do you think? What was it about James's that you found fascinating? Was it kind of because he's kind of really gone from kind of end to end, where he was, it's like he's doing tile work in front of oil, but he was also in California doing the acting and that whole world?
He's an excellent storyteller.
Mm-hmm.
He's very like he's an actor, so he's very theatrical. And kind of all, like, Brian wasn't there on that one, but like all three of us
probably didn't listen to it either.
Yeah. all three of us got along like really well and kind of were able to bounce off of each other.
Right.
And like I said, it was in the morning and I had energy, and
Anthony was drinking Irish coffees.
Yeah.
And
So
doesn't
many.
get much better.
But yeah, I think it's a very selfish reason that I'm doing this, and I don't really care where it goes, just because it's good to be involved.
Right.
So
Right.
That's great.
And that's pretty apparent, I think, that he doesn't care. I'm just kidding. No, but
I edit the episode.
I actually think that it's really important to, like, kind of going back to like being genuine. That's why we do long format, is because it feels more genuine. That's why we have a drink on the show, even though we easily could not do that, or we could we could have a less comfortable way of doing this. Like, there's a lot of different things we could do that would be different, that might be easier or better, but it's less genuine. And I think that people are drawn, like with your Substack, people are drawn to what's good and what's true and what's beautiful. And maybe we don't always hit that mark with our conversation, but people are drawn to it's like authentic. Mm-hmm. And if it's something where we have someone on because they own a big company and we're like hoping that they repost it so that we get our podcast out there,
Right.
People they see through that, because you see that all the time. If you listen to a podcast and some political person is interviewing a person that has a book, the person that wrote the book is only on that political podcast to get the word out. They don't care about that host, most likely. Maybe they're friends, but probably not. And it's fake. And so much of the world is fake now that I think that's why Joe Rogan is so successful. It's why Matt Fradd is so successful, because they just sit down with people who they're genuinely interested in, and they'll talk about. I was listening to
we had a conversation as if no one was actually listening.
Right. And that's what we've done that a few times, where we're like, hey, if everything breaks, it would suck for the guest because they would be expecting to, get the recording and send it to their friends and stuff. But like, I really don't think we would treat it any differently. We'd probably go outside and light up a cigar. But other than that, I'm going to be asking the same things. Right. And if people don't want to listen to that, I don't care.
Right.
Yep. Because if they don't want to listen to it, then nothing that we're going to do is going to cause them to listen to it. Yeah. Right. So it's really, in a way, it is kind of selfish because we're just doing what we want to do. And then we hope that people like it enough to listen to it. And for the amount of advertising and marketing and stuff that we do, we get a lot of listens per episode. So it's like, okay, great. Yeah. But if that radically drops, maybe we need to review what guests we're having on. But honestly, probably not.
Like, we're probably be doing that after you.
Hey, maybe after this one. Somehow we got negative views. So many people thumbs this down.
It got deleted on Spotify for some reason.
But
got canceled.
Yeah, what about you?
Talking about Israel.
What about you, Brian?
Yeah, I guess I would kind of say a bit of both, really.
Can't just do that.
No. I mean,
have an original thought,
dude. No, you know what? I'm just gonna do it. No, I feel like it was their idea. It was both their ideas before, and I kind of just no. Okay, Anthony. Okay, all right. Maybe it was just Anthony's idea.
It was gonna be like us two, and I was really excited, and then Brian joined in, and I was like.
Great.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I somehow I think it was really kind of just through the like bonding over podcasts with Anthony, but then also talking across the street with other guys.
Bonding over podcasts is in like ones you guys listen to and then talking about them.
Okay. Yeah.
Pints with the Cleanest. Let's be real. Let's just call a spade a spade.
The Catholic Man.
The Catholic Man show.
On that note, is that like it's not like you just want to copy and paste Pints with the Cleanest, but like that's kind of what you guys are going for. Where it's just. Yeah. Or maybe like, I don't know, Catholic Man show, something like that. Like, you're not trying to copy and paste, but there's this, you guys have these examples where it's like.
I would say it's probably a combination of those two mostly. Okay. The Catholic Man show, they like have a drink every episode. They do a radio show, so the structure is slightly different, but they have on a lot of people that are either we've had on, we want to have on, or we like will have on.
But would you guys want to be more like going outside of the Catholic world even? Like, is that something you guys would do? Because I would imagine Catholic Man show would be like just Catholics, and you're talking about Catholic.
I think that they've had non-Catholics on, but like they had a guy on who owns a cigar factory, and so they had him on to talk about like how to make a cigar and like. Right. But that was more of like an interest of theirs. It wasn't trying to branch out.
We had a Methodist on.
Ooh, we had a Methodist. Well, former Methodist.
Nice try.
No, what was Alex?
Yeah, true.
Bragwell,
yeah, we did have an. Sorry, I was thinking Mrs. Eschbach, but she converted.
What a coincidence.
But yeah, so there was a guy you probably haven't listened to, but we had a guy who he's in contact with the Daily Wire, and he reached out to the producer of some of their recent films because he's a aspiring actor and filmmaker, and the guy Dallas Saunier was like, "Yeah, we're having the premiere in Nashville. You should come. Send him tickets." He went, met a bunch of the Daily Wire hosts. Is in contact with them, is hoping to be in an upcoming show. And it was like, so I happened to just like the Instagram algorithms brought us together. I reached out to him and we still text like once a week. Nice. Like I'll send him something like, hey, read I sent him JP2's letter to artists. So I was like, you're an aspiring artist. I was like, don't think about this as being like Catholicism preaching. Just read it and tell me what you think.
Right. It's just a good piece.
And he's like, he really enjoys The Chosen. And so there's like interesting things where he's not like all on board for Catholicism, but I think he told us on the podcast, he was like, if you want to talk outside of the podcast, that'd be great. Like, so he's looking for that. So I wouldn't say we're exclusively Catholic. I think it's just, there's so many Catholics in the area that are interesting that I want to talk to, that are doing great things, that I want to prioritize them. But there's by no means.
And you've also left it broad enough. I mean, doing virtue. It's not like doing Catholicism or something. Like it's
Well, there's a guy I reached out to who hopefully will be a guest in the future, and he replied, was like, I'd love to come on. I checked it out on Spotify. Looks great, but I'm not Catholic. Is that a problem? And I was like, no. Like, yeah, it would be a problem if we were asking you to come on to talk about Catholicism. Right. I was like, no, I'm just interested in who you are, who you work for. He started this philosophy group. Like, I'm interested in all of those things. And if you want to talk about the faith, I'm more than happy to, but I'm not going to put you in a spot of like, why aren't you Catholic? Like, that's not my intention. So,
did we totally cut off?
Yeah, I was going to go back. You were talking about this podcast, Pints with the Aquinas. You guys were talking about this.
Right.
Sorry, Brian.
I mean, well, no problem. Yeah, you guys can keep talking. I'm totally fine with listening. I feel like, honestly, going through the episodes, even just remembering back, I feel like just being able to sit here and listen to like conversations go on, I feel like that is a lot of the time like sitting
we're just
over
here to watch Anthony talk to somebody.
Okay,
Well,
I try not to do that. I really do, but the burden of being a host just gets to me.
Well, I mean,
there's a
but
reason you started it too.
yeah, right. But it is just fun. I mean, being able to like listen to the conversation here, but also partake in the conversation, have people on who we're interested in talking to, and we know enough that we have questions for, that it gives us the opportunity to ask those questions, and then and it is cool to also, I mean, it hasn't happened all that often. Only a couple of them have stayed after to just keep talking and everything, but it is still cool to have that opportunity to be like, yeah, we're doing this structured, but now we don't have to be structured and we can talk kind of about anything. So yeah, just having, I think the opportunity has been really cool. So yeah, just to do that conversation
You're
thing.
just secretly recording the after conversation.
For our local supporters.
So that question we asked you earlier, what do you really feel about it?
We actually speak into the microphone, please. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, can you turn your head? Yeah, it's something that I've been thinking about recently, and like kind of where I want to take it. I was pretty intentional about wanting to name it something that was very like, okay, it's like we want it to be like Thomistic, and like, you know, like I don't want it to just be called like the podcast or something that's so vague that no one knows what it's talking about.
The Catholic podcast or something.
Right, but I didn't want it to. But I also didn't want it to just blend in either with other Catholic podcasts or. I think maybe did you come up with a name? I think Mark came up with a name, and I was like,
that's the only reason I'm here.
That's a really good.
He's kept me on for the name.
I don't want him to sue me. But I was like, no, that's actually really good because that's the basis of all of our conversation. It's going to be like virtue is an action. We need to do it. It plays into Mountain Dew. It all works really well.
It's Mountain Dew?
It's DEW. Yeah, doing.
It wasn't supposed to be like dew in the morning, like.
Nope.
No.
We can play off that one
but
too.
I do like that.
So it's actually Mountain Dew?
Yes, technically.
And that's Mark?
Yep, there we go. There's Mountain Dew.
That's great.
We've been waiting. You can have some if you want, but we've been waiting. So Mr. Brown, who is supposed to come on the podcast, we've kind of canceled and rescheduled several times. He introduced me to Mountain Dew when I used to cater for him. He would bring it, and then
you had never drank it before that?
I think I maybe had it, but I wasn't like.
But when Mr. Brown's
I wasn't a
offering
fan
it
of
to you,
it. But like he would, but then he started being like, "Oh, you like it?" So he would get two. So like we'd come to, and then it started. I think at a certain point he got off Mountain Dew.
He got off.
Well,
it's like a drug.
Yeah, I mean that kind of. Yeah,
he's clean now.
But then he kind of told me that he was like, yeah, I think I'll start drinking. I just want to cut back a little bit. So then I would start bringing it to events. Like I would get two or like try the new blend.
That's when
they come out with new stuff. Yeah. But that became a big part of like at Christendom we would like work on Christmas formal or be doing some like SAC project, and we would like bring Mountain Dew. And it's actually funny, like when I went back to Christmas formal this year, I stopped in and the students had Mountain Dew in the fridge. They were like carrying on the tradition. I was like, oh, nice.
Awesome.
Like, so that was part of it. Whereas like I want it to be it's a little bit of a play on words. It's something that we're interested in, and I've been kind of waiting to have Mr. Brown on to actually have it on the show. But
and everything will just click and make sense.
Everything will click.
Right.
All of a sudden, I'll like
feel right.
My new purpose. I'll be like, okay. But yeah, I don't know. I think that conversation. Cut it back in senior year. He had a class called Family and. Is it Family Household?
Family and Household.
Family and Household. And we read a passage from a book called Reclaiming Conversation by Sherry Turkle, I believe.
That one.
And I still have the book somewhere. I haven't finished it, but really it was kind of like an anti-technology book. How like, you know, technology, everyone checks it, everyone has to have it. Yeah, everyone pulls it out. Yeah. No, but actually this is an interesting thing. One time on the podcast, I brought this up and I was like, yeah, this is like one of the only times in the day where like 2 hours in, I'm not thinking about taking my phone. Whereas if I was sitting outside, even if we were having a great conversation, I'd probably still check my phone. And I might silence it, but I'd probably check it because there's a lull in conversation, or I'd show someone something.
Yeah.
And I'm not opposed to that. I don't think, like, especially if we did like a 4-hour podcast, I wouldn't be opposed to like pulling up a video and watching it and discussing it or something. But it's so much better not to have it. And it's nice to know that you can go several hours without checking.
Well, and it's
like
crazy.
you just don't need to.
It's crazy that we've reached that point where, I mean, it's hard because we kind of grew up with it. It's not like we had phones. I mean, for the generation below us, it's going to be so much worse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But just in the last 5 to 6 years, it's crazy to think about where it's like, it's so far and few. It's so rare that you like look back and you're like, wow, I didn't look at my phone for 4 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that it's rare and you're surprised by it
Yeah.
is kind of terrifying too. Even as nice it is, it's kind of like, oh, that was great. But that only happens so much that it's just, so that's where it's these conversations you're kind of getting on top of the conversations themselves, elevating and just having these great conversations. You're just stepping away from all of that too, which is huge.
Yeah.
And I think it's something you need to do. And if you aren't already doing it, I think especially as a guy, it's really something you should, like, you know, anyone listening to this, if you don't have a thing that you're doing for Lent, like make that your thing. Be able to plug your phone in and leave the room and then spend time with your friends, or
even
spend
if it's
time
just
with
like
your wife,
even if
or
just Sundays too, where it's like Sundays you are on your phone.
Yep.
So you don't have to like,
or
you're
even
not at work,
like
doesn't
start
matter.
small. If it's too, like every time you go into the chapel, don't take your phone in.
Yeah.
Do a holy hour without your phone. Yeah, like it's great to have the Exodus readings. It's great to have the biblical readings, but take a book in and read the book, or pray the rosary, or just sit there.
Spy watch if you don't have one.
Yeah, like you'll know, especially if you go to like an actual like holy hour where there's exposition and benediction. Just go at the beginning and you stay until the end, and then you know when it's time to leave. And don't because there's a I've seen people, I've walked past people checking social media in church, and it's like sometimes I'll bring my phone in because I'm looking at Exodus. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I need to look up this Bible quote that I was reflecting on. And I'm tempted to look at it, but I'm like, I don't want an Instagram reel accidentally playing. Like, it's probably just for the embarrassment of it, but like, I'm not gonna check it.
Right.
But the fact that you have to go in, silence your phone, put it on silent, don't check social media, all this stuff.
But
like,
how
just,
often are you actually in church? It's like, you can
just
be
don't
there
bring
without
it.
having to check. Yeah.
Yeah, so
you're still getting like the buzz,
and you're still getting a buzz, like, or you feel like you get the
Vibration.
phantom buzz where you like think
Right.
your phone is
Oh
buzzing
my
and you
gosh.
check it. So it's like, start with that. Don't do that, or pick a day of the week where you're not going to do that. Something that really bothers me too is people will get together and watch a movie like as friends, and then everyone's checking their phone at a slow part in the movie. It's like, you hate to do this, but I'm almost at the point where I want
Get the
people,
basket and everyone has to
yeah,
put their
everyone
phone
put
in.
your phone in, because I just want to talk to you, or I just want to enjoy this movie and not know, oh, what else is this, what other movies is this actor in? Oh, I can pull it up. Like, just talk about it. And then at the end, you could look it up and see who's right. But I think it really ruins conversation. And
Totally.
and we have such a short-term memory problem, too, that, like, without our phones, we're useless. Like, can't even. I think Matt Walsh was talking about this on his show one time, where he was like, I literally don't even know if I could get to the studio. Like, without my phone, because he's like, it's so easy, just like Google Maps, put it on, go. Oh, there's.
But then Google Maps, you're not actually like looking up and looking at the road and learning the way.
And he's
like,
like,
you're
I could
just looking down your phone,
and that's a huge problem. Like, I mean, I can get most places if I've been there a few times. I can get there, but I don't always remember the road names.
Right.
But like 10 years ago, everyone would be like, oh, it's off of this. And that's why if an older person gives you directions, they'll tell you like it's south of this and you'll pass this on the right and take a left on this road. And you're like, yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. Right. And like our generation and the generation below us, it's like, if the phones ever just like go out for a day, everyone's lost. Like no one's going to work.
Well, that's something it's a small thing, but there are times where I'm like, okay, I've done this route before. I'm not pulling up Google Maps. And if I take the wrong turn, that's fine. 5 minutes. But like, it's just funny how it's become such a habit. It's like, I know how to get back. I do. Like, it's, but you're kind of like, but I can't like visualize it because I don't remember which street. It's like, you can get back without Google Maps. And like, even that, like, it's weird. Or like, oh my gosh, I actually have to like look and like be aware of the road. I'm not just constantly like, oh, okay, so I'm turning in mile. Yeah. Not even actually reading the name of the road or whatever. I just now have to follow the line on my phone. So
and then you're getting texts. You're like,
right.
let me answer while I'm also trying to.
Yeah. Well, you just get a self-driving car. That's really the solution.
Yeah.
Let the car drive.
Well. My down payment's already in. So good.
Right.
All the money we're getting from this. So.
Something that is kind of
that much, huh?
There's a question that's kind of been on my mind as we've been talking about this, and it.
Is this for me or James?
It's for James. Sorry, I was just looking
people.
at you. It's for it's for our fans, Mark.
Yeah. They're coming in on the phone.
So there's that book that I mentioned, Reclaiming Conversation, and how people don't talk anymore. I think that's probably the overarching problem. Like I can't tell you how many people I've talked to, and I'm like personally guilty of this, where you're like interacting with people at your workplace or interacting with people at your parish for years. Like, I've never actually talked to them. And it would be so easy just to be like, hey, I've seen you at Mass a lot. Like, who are you? What's your name? Do you want to get a drink? Do you want to get dinner?
Right.
Like, not in a creepy way. Like, could be just a family that you've seen a bunch of times and you respect the way that they discipline their kids, or something super simple.
Discipline their kids? What are you saying?
Yeah, let's go. Yeah. Pro discipline. No.
Man. Amen.
But you just don't, because it's
Right.
easier just to, and like, I've seen people in church with like earbuds in, and who knows, maybe they're listening to Gregorian chant, but it's just like, even in church you can't just like be there and be present with the Eucharist. You have to like have your own thing going. But it seems to me that I wouldn't say so. I think that that's the root problem, is avoiding conversation, avoiding confrontation, not talking to people, not expressing yourself, and just because I think people are programmed to just like, well, I'll just repost that it's President's Day,
Right.
But I'm not gonna like read about it. I don't know anything.
I'm
about
not
it.
gonna read some
I'm just
speech
gonna
from
like
Abraham,
kind of.
or-
I'm just gonna show that
Right.
So that's definitely an issue. But I feel like maybe I don't really know what the root is, but it seems that a huge problem is that people don't know how to write. And Jordan Peterson talks about how if you can think and you can write, no one can stop you. Because if you get into some legal dispute, or you take a job, if you can't express yourself, you're useless. Like, you can't do anything.
The
but
thoughts
if you
in your own head make sense to you, but when you actually have to write them, it's like,
yeah,
oh, okay, people actually see my thoughts laid
Yeah.
out in a way that they might not understand, so I have to make them comprehensive, coherent, and compelling too.
And I think that that's something that the liberal arts education does really well, is where you're in the classroom, you're learning, you're taking in all this information, and you have to be tested on it. But I think a really interesting way of testing is, like, you need to present on this topic. So you need to learn this certain topic really well, or you need to debate this topic. But a more simple way that is a really good way of learning is just, you need to write on this. Like, hopefully you know it intellectually, but you need to show me on a piece of paper,
Right.
what your thoughts are, what's your research, how are you backing up your argument, is it reasonable, is it unreasonable, and all of that, and how can you present it. And, or even, like, there's a really helpful way of doing this is, like, pick a topic you disagree with and argue like you agree with the side you disagree with. Come up with, and Aquinas does that, right? Like, the reply to the
Iron
objections.
Man, not straw man. Right?
Yeah, and so so it seems like with the Broken Binnacle, that's something that y'all are trying to encourage, is to encourage people to write. And now it's more geared towards things that they agree with and with things that they like, but it's just to encourage writing. Because I think after you leave college, if you've been to that's like a big caveat, if you've been to a college that requires you to like actually critically think and write critically, but then after that, unless you're a journalist, it's like you don't really have to do that, other than maybe emails.
Yeah.
So yeah, what are your thoughts on, like, as a having a Substack, running a Substack, the ability to be able to put your thoughts down, and also that vulnerability of, like, this is what I think about a topic, and people can read that and critique me,
I've done very little writing. I mean, before the Broken Binnacle, outside of college, I'd done very little writing. But it was through Criste that I wanted to do more writing. And again, it's just because it's like, I prefer tests way more, because all you have to do is regurgitate the information. Like, you study this stuff, and it's just like, you have to kind of just input this response for these questions. With writing, it's like you actually have to engage with it and coherently, not just have good thoughts, but put them together well and be persuasive. But even among the guys that are part of the Broken Binnacle, like, some of them are like, I'm not like a writer. Like, they wouldn't have done this by themselves. Like, they didn't feel this inner drive to become a writer. I'm not gonna like say which guys have said that, but but they're all good writers. Like, they're all intelligent men, and they know how to express themselves intelligently. But they're like, well, I'm not really like a writer. I don't know why I would be a part of this. And I've talked about that. I've even brought up Jordan Peterson too. The idea of, like, it's not a matter of like, oh, I want to become a writer, that's my identity now. The point is, if you're seriously engaging with these topics, one of the best ways to engage with them is writing. Because it might be great that you read that book, but form some sort of opinion on it and write it, again, in a persuasive, coherent, intelligent way. That's a whole other thing, because again, it's easy to have your own thoughts. But it all comes out differently on the page because you actually create something outside of yourself that you kind of have to correspond with as well. Because when you see it written down on paper, it kind of has this this existence of its own, but it kind of works as like a soundboard too, where you see your thoughts and you're kind of like, it made sense in my head and I see them out here and it's like, it doesn't make sense. But it's such a healthy way of being able to translate your thoughts, because even someone like a teacher, where you have someone who's brilliant, they don't know actually how to like translate what they're saying. They don't know how, like, they're not, they're just so in their own world, as brilliant as they may be, that they don't know how to express it. So I think writing, regardless of whether you want to be a writer or not, is just one of the best ways for you to actually develop those thoughts in a way that you can actually express them to other people in a way that's understandable.
It's funny with homework during college. It's definitely like when you get into that slum where you have 50 pages for this class and 25 pages for this class, and you're just like, I'm gonna read them. And I think as Dr. Cuddeback would say, there's reading and then there's reading. You can read it, but you don't really understand it, or you don't, like, I'm just doing it to check a box, and then you're reading it to actually engage with the material. And then for one thing, you have to sort of talk about it in class, but it's another thing to be able to write it down coherently and be like, yeah, I read it and I took notes on it and I understand it and I wrote it all down. Like, I got this. This is perfect.
But internalize it and feel this need to express that then. George Orwell has this good essay called Why I Write, and he speaks of it almost being like, I don't write on anything unless... I mean, he has much more discipline where he can actually write, and he has the habit of writing in a way that I wouldn't have it, but that's something I'd love to cultivate among myself and just the other guys as well. But he speaks about this, like, demon to write about something. Demon's a little dark, but, like, he's saying he writes about something because he feels like he needs to express it. And G.K. Chesterton talks about this too, where he says any idea that's not a good idea doesn't feel this drive to be expressed. Like, a bad idea doesn't want to be incarnated. A good idea always wants to find expression and incarnation. So if it's a good idea, you will feel this, like, need to express it and write about it, or express it in some way, even if it's in a conversation. But, like, with writing, it allows you to do that in a very special way, because it's not just you speak on the spot. Like, you have time to actually develop and work, like, write it down. You have drafts where you write it at first and you're like, okay, then you're kind of working with the writing itself, and there's this kind of dialogue you have with it where you're constantly changing and editing in a way that you wouldn't have in a conversation, as great as conversation is, which is so natural. But
I just had this thought where you were like, if, like, an idea that it needs to be incarnated, if it's like a good idea or like a true idea, is that for some reason that made me think of, like, the good is self-diffusive, where it's like, it's always just going to naturally go out and go forth because
it's creative acts.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, and that's why St. John describes God as the Word, right? Like, it's because it's something that's like, it can't be just contained in itself. It needs to go out, and that's why the Gospels
and to continually be expressed.
Right. It's like, that's why the Gospels are written. It can't just be, hey, did you hear about this Jesus guy?
Right.
Tell everyone. It's like, it has to be written. It has to be recorded somewhere to refer back to, but also because it has to almost like take another form. It can't just be living in the minds of men. It's true. It needs to be recorded and, like, set in stone, is like, and that's why the commandments were put in stone, right? It can't just be something that Moses tells everyone, hey, there's these 10 commandments, keep them. It's like, it needs to be solidified and actually put promulgated. Promulgated.
Right, but even Christ is like the Word made flesh. It's like, the truth exists in the mind of God, sure, but it, like, the order of creation is towards, like, incarnation as well, where it's like the good things are expressed and they come into being because they are good. The fact that they exist is because they are good. So any idea that, again, and this is it's a great essay, it's called The Mystagogue by Chesterton, where he's actually talking about within art and art critics, and then he says where this is kind of goes even to, like, modern art, where it's kind of inexpressible and they don't really have anything to say about it, that it like, it's beyond words. But it's like, no, if it's a good idea, it will try to be expressed, even if we do it in a way that's totally doesn't match up to its level. But the fact is that you tried means that it means something to you. Like, the honest man will always try to express the ideas that have captured him and have arrested him and he's wrestling with. if he doesn't, then it's like, okay, well, it clearly wasn't that good of an idea if you didn't feel this need to do something with it and express it and bring it into being in some way.
Kind of makes me think of, there's a movie, it's called, I think it's called The Agony and the Ecstasy, that has, it's the story of Michelangelo, and it has, who's the really famous guy?
Really famous guy. That's good.
Sorry, that was very vague. He's
There's another.
He's the main character in the Ten Commandments and Charlton Heston.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I was gonna say, and Ben-Hur.
I was gonna say Moses.
Yeah, close. So Charlton Heston is Michelangelo, and at the very beginning, it's based on the true story, obviously. And at the beginning, he's shown, because he only wants to be a sculptor. He doesn't want to paint. And so really, it's the agony and the ecstasy is he doesn't want to do the Sistine Chapel. The Pope keeps pushing him to. Finally, he's like, okay, I'll do it. The Pope gives him a limited budget. He starts, and then he's like, this is not enough. I give up. I'm not doing this. The Pope's like fighting wars. And then he shows up, and he's like, look, I will do this, but it needs to be like way better. I need way more money. And then the Pope grants it, and then he does it. It's this great work. But right at the beginning, like I think it's the opening, or not the opening scene, but the first scene that you see Charlton Heston, he's got this big block of marble, and he's talking to one of the guys, and the guy's like, what are you going to do with this? He's like, oh, there's a form inside, and I'm just here to release that form. Right. And they're like, what are you talking about? It's like, no, I see it. Like, there's an image in this stone, and my job is just to remove the parts that don't matter. And it's kind of interesting because it's very similar, where it's like there's this truth that's there, and you just have to get to it. And from Michelangelo's perspective, obviously he's a brilliant sculptor and painter and all that, but he just would like see, it's like, okay, it's there, and now I just have to paint it or remove the rock to get to what's there. Right. But he already saw that in the thing itself. But yeah, no, it's a good movie. It's a little slow, but it's
going from, it's true, but it's going from this formless kind of, I guess not chaos, but it's this formless thing. And if it's a good idea, it will feel this need to be formed in a specific way too. It's not just like vague. Like you even see it within kind of the gender ideology and just so many other things, where it's like it's this kind of inexpressible, fluid thing. It's like, no, good things are determined in certain ways too. Like they have this form and this structure as well. And that doesn't mean there's not this like interchange and interweaving between all things, but they have these definite forms where it's like good things are particular too, especially for us in the created world. It's like the things that we love are particular things too. It's not just this general vague thing. It's like, yes, there's the platonic ideal, it's just consciousness, whatever it might be, but for us it's like we know them in particular ways, and if they are good, they will seek to be expressed in those particular ways.
It's almost like it's this idea of like there's complexity in objectivity, not just complexity in subjectivity, where it's like, yeah, there's only two genders. That's subjective, or that's objective. But within those two very specific divisions of people, there's tons of complexity.
Well, this going again,
which is why there's all these like beautiful differences, like neurologically, physically, spiritually, between men and women. But I feel like there's like the social movement is just trying to look at all the complexity and like it's all over the place. We can't possibly define the gender, and and it's like, well, okay.
Well, not to. I mean, I was ragging on people who are just like, oh, St. Thomas Aquinas says, but this is something I love about distinguishing that, where St. Thomas Aquinas says you can only have true diversity within unity. Anything else is just difference. If there's no unity, it's just difference. But you can only have true diversity with unity. And again, where it's like the two genders thing, it's like, no, from this idea of the two genders, you can actually have true diversity among those, because you actually have this unity, which they are a diversity of. Yeah. But when it's just everything's diversity and there's no unity, it's like, no, that's just difference. Yeah. But the thing is, it's not just different, because there are likenesses and sameness, like similarities and differences that you see, and but there are these unities that you can find, and you can see in the genders. So it's this fascinating thing. It's like, well, you actually can't have diversity without some sort of unity.
Right. Well, I mean, ultimately, all of that goes back. The first thing I thought of when you said that is the Trinity, right? Like you have this undivided unity, and then within that, there's this division of three persons. That's like this complex, like relationship of three persons, but it's still in this one united Godhead. It's like, how do you, but that's the model. Like the Trinity is the pinnacle of this united yet kind of.
Do you say pinnacle or binnacle?
I know.
I think I said pinnacle.
Full circle.
The broken pinnacle.
We'll put that as our tagline. Host compares Trinity to the binnacle.
Right. You guys,
it's there.
Did you read Tintin?
I love Tintin. Yeah.
Yeah. Everyone's like, what is it? The Broken Barnacle? Something.
Yeah. I was actually gonna say. So when I don't know if it was when I first heard it, but I think that when I was listening to your interview with John Jack, he mentioned something about that, and I was like, that was in the back of my mind, but I didn't think of it. And then he said that, and I was like, that's definitely what my mind went to subconsciously, because he talks about blistering barnacles.
Right.
And he's always saying these alliterative things.
I was really just trying to distract Anthony from getting into the Trinity because
I know. I was like, okay, we're about to try and describe.
Well, you know what they say: you can only speak about the Trinity for a minute before you get into heresy. So.
A minute? That's a lot.
That's a lot.
I don't even know. I made
you
that
just
up.
keep reiterating the same thing in different.
You just
words.
keep saying three persons, God.
Yeah. With I had one question just about, I guess,
about the Trinity.
Moving on. All right, Mark, do you have anything?
So the Trinity is basically
No. You don't.
No,
understand.
about writing in general and being able to form thoughts, but form thoughts in a way that are kind of always in dialogue, so that you're able to form thoughts better, and then also you can write better, and because you're always working and editing with what you're writing. Obviously you're doing something that is structured, and you're doing this every 6 weeks or whatever, and you have to be writing that stuff. But it seems that a lot of people, and we were talking about this before, and that's why there's need for conversation. There's this need that people have because they can't form their own thoughts. Mm-hmm. And you were talking about writing being a good outlet for that. Is that it almost seems that with that being the case, you were talking about there's objective and there are these objective things, and there's diversity within that. But then I don't know, I feel like it just made me think of when people are writing, or a lot of people need to write and they need to be able to form their thoughts. But is that do I need to form my thoughts into, when you say that, do I need to form it into
Turabian?
Yeah, with footnote. No. I guess I'm kind of losing my train of thought, but
Thanks, Mark.
No. I kind of was losing it before, also too, though. So I guess just with writing and forming thoughts, can you just delve deeper a little more into that?
More about the writing process itself.
Yeah. Or and why it's so beneficial for people to be able to form their thoughts.
I think it just forces you to keep honing the ideas that you might have. And again, it's almost like the Michelangelo thing, where it's you have these thoughts, but they're these blocks, and you feel this intuition, or kind of I see something there, but it's not really definite yet. It's not expressed in a compelling way. So I think with the writing process, a lot of the time the best articles you're going to have are going to be the ones where you're going with the first round and you're just going through continuous drafts and constantly revisiting it with fresh eyes. And it's something I struggle with because I'm a perfectionist. I write slowly and I just edit as I go, which is, I think, a bad way of doing it. If you have the ideas, you start with the blocks and just get that out. You come back to it and you see the blocks that you've written. That's just metaphorically, you have the blocks that you've written, and then it's actually there and you can actually kind of work with it a little more, because when it's in your head, it's hard to see it all in one with just your head. But when you have it on paper or just on writing, it's okay, you can actually read through it and does it make sense? But through each process, I think with each draft where you're actually getting feedback from people who are challenging you on things, you're kind of oh yeah, I kind of assumed that made sense. Even the idea of an anthememe where you kind of go from A to C, because for you is kind of intuitive, but people are wait, where's the B in between? I kind of see where you're going, but you kind of just jump there. Right. So kind of filling in the gaps, but also just trying to bring out more the ideas that you have. So it has to be a process where you're actually engaging with your own writing, but also having other people see it as well, because it makes sense to you, but someone else might come in and be like, what the heck do you mean by this? And then it forces you to kind of step out of like the thinking you had before and be like, oh, okay, wow, I didn't even think that was a possibility. That was a possible way of seeing what I was saying.
Right.
Especially the more complicated the topic might be, where it's hard to express it in words and you just write it out and it's really clunky. And then through the drafting process, through re-engaging with it yourself and having other people engage with it and give you feedback, you're able to clear away what doesn't need to be there, and also give it more definite form.
Okay.
And I'm still really bad at that. Like, I would say I'm still not a good writer in so many ways. And I would love to be at the point where I'm actually going through 3 or 4 drafts at least before each post, but I'm at the point where I'm like 1 or 2 maybe.
Sure.
But I feel like the more you're going through that process and refining it, the better. But again, you actually have to be disciplined about that, where you're actually starting to write the 3 to 4 weeks before you're supposed to post, as opposed to the week before, because then you just run out of time.
Yeah.
It's a whole process.
And it almost seems like if people aren't as, either don't have their own kind of blog or just like this structured thing that they have to add to, it would almost seem like if it's people who are wanting to form their thoughts better, it's like, okay, I need to write it down, and then conversation is that next thing. It's like, okay, I have this idea, I was thinking about it, instead of having like someone come up and be like, okay, I just want you to edit this, like write on it kind of thing. It's like, okay, no, I'm going to take that and I'm going to talk to this person about it, and I'm like, I'm showing you what my paper was, but I want you to kind of like obviously converse with the idea. But that's just interesting, because I think it shows the necessity of why we need to converse, and that we're like conversational and social animals.
And the pursuit of truth it's not just a singular thing. Like you have to be doing it with other people, because you might be right about certain things, but even your own understanding of it could be better developed by other people questioning. So like, I don't really understand what you mean by that. Right. And it forces you to actually, again, get outside of your own head to have a kind of this sounding board as well. So it's again, you don't have to be a writer to do the writing. I think it's important to just be developing that skill, because it actually helps you develop your own thoughts too. It's not about the writing's great, but it also kind of refines your own thinking too, in a way that you wouldn't have had if you were just thinking them yourself. Right.
Yeah. And it just makes me think of like extended family that like, as you were saying, they do have these thoughts that are right, and like by themselves, it's like, yeah, no, that's a good thought. But then when it comes to trying to either persuade or even have conversations with other people about like what, like just talking about ideas, or like trying to show why this person is wrong, it's especially even now in just society, it's so easy to be like, no, this is how it is, stop talking, because like it's just these polar opposites, because they literally can't talk. Like they're just talking past each other, and so
there's an insecurity too, because you're scared of being wrong. That if you are wrong, then everything's going to come crashing down.
Right, and you're almost more prone to be wrong if you're not actually conversing with people. Right, because you're just conversing with yourself, and then obviously you're going to be right because you're conversing with yourself. And it's like, where are you going to be wrong?
Well, and that's kind of the danger of all the sophisticated algorithms and stuff with social media, is that you can actually, like, you can kind of develop a worldview and then be constantly fed that worldview. Or you find a podcaster that like kind of aligns with your views and then only listen to them. Yeah. And while that's good in some degree, you also need to go out and be like, well, I'm going to listen to this podcaster who's pro-choice and kind of get into his mindset. And I don't want to do it too much to the point where I'm like losing my faith. Guessing, I think I mentioned this. I mentioned this the other night when Mark was over, where I might be Chesterton, but I don't want to. I feel like Chesterton is one of those people that you like everyone attributes quotes to, like Churchill and all that. Yep. But I think it was Chesterton who said, like, you want to be open-minded, but not so open-minded that your brains fall out, right? So it's like you want to be open-minded to say, okay, I have this basis of reality. I know what human nature is. I know what my faith teaches, but like, what do Muslims believe? And then get into that a little bit, but not to the point where you're like, wow, maybe this might be right.
Right.
Like don't go so deep into something that you know that your faith disagrees with that you're becoming open to it or becoming weak in your faith. Use that as an opportunity to strengthen your faith, and then to be able to argue your faith and say, well, actually, I'm correct and you're Muslim. And like what's great is when you
you're
see
Muslim,
like,
so you're wrong.
well, no, but what's great is if you see like a Catholic debater, like Trent Horn does this all the time, where he'll debate someone and he'll be debating like a Protestant, and they'll say something. He's like, well, that's not what you believe if you're Methodist. And they're like, wait, what? He's like, well, Methodists believe this. Like, if you believe that, you're actually Presbyterian or something. And it's like he's telling them more about what their specific, like so-called sect believes, because he understands it, but it's not in a way that he's like, yeah, actually, I kind of agree with that. He's like, no, I'm very clearly opposed to you, but here's what, like, let me teach you about your faith. Which, if you can get to that point where you're like teaching people, like, oh, you believe in this kind of ideology or this philosophy or this theology, let me tell you about that, and you can present that in a way that's like believable and true. Like, no, like that's a much easier way for you to convert people, because not only are you knowledgeable about your faith, you can tell them about their faith. Like, this is what you guys profess to believe. I don't know if you like personally believe that, but this is what Methodists believe.
But finding the good things that they have and building off of that, where it's like you even see St. Paul, where he speaks about the temple to the unknown God. It's kind of like, okay, you guys have a sense of this. You guys, okay, there's something here.
Yeah.
Let me affirm that.
Right.
Find the good things that they have and build out of that, where you can actually build off of the truth, and then it starts to push out the lies, where it's like, okay, it's pantheon, but like, what's this thing about the unknown God kind of thing, where it's like, you do that with other people, and it's like, well, why do you guys even have that in the first place?
Yeah.
Like, where do you think that even comes from, the sense of the unknown God? Or just even anyone today, where it's like, where do you think your sense of goodness comes from? I mean, even right now, I'm like listening to a Sam Harris book.
Dang. What's it called?
It's called Waking Up. Yeah, but it's this kind of thing where it's like, okay, I'm listening. I'm like, I think he's kind of reductionist on a lot of levels, but like, there's a lot of things where I'm like, okay, yeah, that's good. I can agree with that, and like he's got that right. But I wouldn't think I'd be able to do that if I hadn't gone to Criste or something where I had this foundation where it's like, no, I've actually heard from other people who are also very wise, and I'm more compelled by their arguments than someone who's kind of introducing everything down to a materialistic approach, where it's just like, oh, you don't really need religion, because with spirituality you can get meditation. Meditation apparently is the highest form of human goodness, and it's kind of like, well, I think you're just reducing everything down to some like secular Buddhism at this point. Like, it's not really, like, you can't really separate it too from the religion itself, because outside of itself, then it loses its source in a way that I don't think it can exist, because you might be like, oh, okay, well, I'm a good person, I meditate, and I'm one with this consciousness, but how is that going to really be passed down to your children? Like, and they're going to have to deal with that themselves, but like, there's no sense of tradition there too. It lacks this comprehensive, like, Catholic universal character, where like, for me, the Catholic faith, it's not just like one argument, it's all these different things. Even Newman talks about this. It's this convergence and confluence of all these different things, where it's not the silver bullet argument that convinced me rationally. It's more like, I just know so many good things from this, and there's also the rational arguments, but it's not just rational arguments, because an atheist can make a lot of good rational arguments as well, as sophisticated and like clever as they may be. But like, for me, it's more just the comprehensive, where it's not just reason, it's also just the goodness of my Catholic community. And you might see that goodness in other communities, but they lack the rational part. Right. For me, it's more just like, I see this comprehensive character to it all, that all connects, and it's contextual and connected. But having that, I can be confident, and I can actually, I come from this rich tradition where I can actually respond to someone like Sam Harris and be like, no, those are good things. That's like I agree with that part, actually. Yeah. Or I agree with that part, but I think you're taking it in the wrong direction. But if I didn't have that strong traditionalist sense of who I was, I would just be like, oh my gosh, he's right. Yeah, meditation. Yeah. Like, I just need to get into meditation, and it'll fix everything, and I'll be a good human being.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I think that Matt Fradd is such a good interviewer, because he'll have people on, and most of them are Catholic, some of them aren't, but he has this really incredible ability to like affirm people in the good that they're doing, and also be like, yeah, you're doing that, and I think that's wonderful, and like God bless. And he'll actually say this a lot, where he's like, I really like, I pray for all the Protestant brothers and sisters that listen to this podcast, and it's like, wow, that's like, no one does that. That's awesome.
Right.
But he's also willing to be like, but this thing is true. Right. like, and
Right.
I don't know why you disagree with that. So
Right, you guys were wrong. Like it's
something, yeah, and
I'll
I
still
think
pray
it's
for you,
it's
though.
a really good practice for people to do, is to not to sidestep evil, like St. Paul talks about, like run from evil. Like if it's something you can't drive out of your life with like prayer and fasting, like you have to run from it, and like you have to do that.
Right.
Like that's very clear. Sorry,
don't dialogue with the devil.
but at the same time, it's wrong to just find a book or a TV show or just anything, and if you can find one thing that's slightly wrong, to just condemn the entire thing.
Right.
Like you wouldn't do that with a person. Like if a person, now on a general level, and maybe it depends on the belief, but on a general level, you can say abortion is wrong across the board. But with that individual person who thinks that abortion is wrong, you're not going to be like, well, you're going to hell.
Right.
Yeah, maybe they're at a point where you need to get that dramatic, but really, in terms of individual conversion, you'd be like, well, why do you think that this is right? And like, what about the baby? And like, where do you think life starts? And it's a bigger conversation.
But a lot
and
of
so I
times
think people are too
it's not
lazy to
rational
do
a lot of
that.
time. Like
Yeah.
it might be more
Right.
just like there's deep wounds there, and they've suffered because of X
Totally.
factor. This, like maybe just an abusive relationship, or like again like a fatherless generation where you have a lot of guys who didn't have a dad, or someone went through an abortion in the past and it's a terrible experience, but they don't want to talk about it, or they never got healing from it. So it's one of those times where it's like, yes, I believe that's like abortion's wrong, but I'm not going to condemn. Like, first of all, I can't actually condemn you to hell because that's not in my power. And like, when you believe someone's going to hell, it's not like you're going to hell because you did that. It's like, no, if you continue on this path, ultimately, I think you're jeopardizing your chances of getting to heaven, very much so.
Right.
But you just never know what grace is going to work in their life. It's like, you don't have to be there to condemn them. You need to be there to actually listen and understand, so you can actually turn them back and help them walk back.
And there's so much, and that's the beautiful thing about Catholicism, is so much of that, I think, is prudence. Like, if you're, again, if you're if you're doing street evangelization and there's a drug addict that comes to you, you talking to them might totally change their life, and you becoming their friend and having them over for dinner could totally change their life. But if you have a bunch of kids and you have a drug addict all the time, that might be good for them to see your family and everything, but that's not a good influence for your kids.
Right.
So there's a prudence that goes into that, but I think that it's wrong for Catholics to just be like, well, like they're on drugs, like write them off.
Right.
Yeah, you do get to a certain point where it's like, you've proven time and time again that you're addicted to this, you don't care, you're not turning your life around, and then there is that decision to like, we need to part ways.
Right. Take more drastic.
But I think that Catholics too many times are just very like kind of one strike and you're out, and not.
Well, there's
it's
Catholic
it's
fundamentalism.
Yeah,
for
it's
sure.
this focus on like God's justice and not enough on God's mercy. Or you have the flip side of like, God's merciful, you could basically do anything and he'll forgive you, and then there's like no consequences.
Did you see the whole thing about the ads for the Super Bowl with Jesus? He gets
Oh,
us
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
thing.
He
Right.
gets us, yeah.
Well, it's funny because I always thought they were kind of like, oh, they look like a good group. I never actually looked them up. But then that ad, I was kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, they're
Right.
Wait,
right.
who
But
did
it's a
who
whole
did the
mercy
ad?
thing. But it's like, no, there's truth as well. It's not
Right.
just love; it's truth as well.
It's like this, they basically believe it's kind of like this Buddhist version of Jesus, where it's 100% mercy, but like no justice really. And I think the ad shows different things, but it's like a cop and a black person and like this woman and another woman outside of a family planning center. And it's just like, basically no matter where you're at, God accepts you and loves you. And while that's true, it's
They only
very,
leave it at that.
It's right. Yeah, they leave it at that, and it's also like, yeah, that's like Jesus can do that. Like he can eat with the sinners and tell the adulteress to sin no more. But that's not necessarily your role. Is to just be like, I don't care what you've done, anything doesn't matter. You can tell me anything; it won't faze me, and you're beautiful, and you should keep living your life the same way. It's like that. Like that's obviously not
the
the call of
incoherent thing about it
Catholicism.
is like it's all about mercy, but the same groups that they're like pandering to are the ones that are constantly marching for justice causes, where it's like,
Yeah,
wait,
right.
but I thought it wasn't about justice. I thought it was just about
Pro-choice,
mercy.
yeah.
Again, it's like we're an age where we accept everything and forgive nothing. But it's like, well, and now you guys want mercy, like, but it's like you've accepted everything, but you can't ever forgive anything because you've been hurt by everything that you've accepted,
Yeah.
and because of that, you're in a sense, damned. Not like, you don't even have to mean that literally, but like you are damned because you're so broken by the things that you accepted and just kind of let run wild in your life that.
Yep. Something that I try to reflect on when you're faced with either a difficult decision or you just like see someone that's like related to you or kind of close in your life and you see that they made a bad decision. The immediate Catholic response is, I think, to be like very judgmental. Like, oh, I can't believe they did that. They fell in that way. They did this sin. They're hanging out with these type of people. But Ben Shapiro talked about, I don't remember the context. I think he was talking about women who get like pregnant outside of marriage. Right. And he was like, there's a very easy, and he was talking specifically about the like Jewish community, but this applies to Catholicism, I think, just as well. Right. Where he's like, it's very easy to just jump on that person to be like, how dare you do that? How you need to be sorry and like you're a terrible person. But he's like, really, what you need to do is approach it, especially if you're like the family of this person, is to approach it in a as reasonable way as possible. And thankfully with Catholicism we have confession, and you can be like, all right, go to confession, make things right, and then go from there. But he's like, in the Jewish community, you need to have a conversation with this person to say, you've made a bad decision. Like, you know that, everyone else knows that. From here on out, the only thing that you can do that's going to be helpful is to make a series of really good decisions. Are you marrying this person? Yes or no? No. Why? Okay. This reason, we're not in love. It was an accident. Whatever. Okay. That's fine.
Huge wake up call.
That's fine. That's the trajectory of your life. Or you are marrying this person. Great. When's the wedding? Like, let's all get behind that and celebrate the good thing that you're doing. Right. But that applies to a lot of different things where it's like, you've made a bad decision. Now are you going to make a series of good decisions to improve your life? Or are you going to continue to make bad decisions and like live with an abusive person and get on drugs and
play
all this
the victim
stuff?
Card.
Yeah, and play the victim card. And you have free will and you can do that. But if you want the support of the community, we need to see that you made a bad decision, you're contrite for that decision, and now you've amended your ways and you're going to make a series of good decisions. And if you do that, we're all going to be behind you.
Right.
And it's like, yeah, that's like that is what mercy is being like, we accept that you did a bad thing. That's between you and God, and how can we support you? Right.
Again, always leaving the door open, but being like, there are certain things that you have to do if you want to actually come back into, like, again, you've
it's not
depending on what you choose, you can choose to step
out
of the community, but like we're a part of a community. Like, there are certain things we have to hold together for it to actually be a community and for good things to come out of it.
Yeah.
But like, again, being like, we're not completely rejecting you, but there is this kind of standard, at least like we have to see some sort of movement towards, again, rectifying your life, where it's not just, again, playing the victim card.
I had this conversation 2 nights ago with this lady. I was bartending and she came into the bar and I poured her a glass of wine. We were talking. She's not Catholic. She's been married a couple times. Wasn't for her, apparently. And then, which was sad, but over the course of the conversation, she basically admitted to me that she was an alcoholic. And so I was like, I'm sorry, like, I kind of feel bad pouring you wine, but you already paid for it and you're already mostly done with it. But she just kind of had this sad life. Like, she doesn't really have any friends. Her family like talks about her and gossips about her because she's an alcoholic, but she admits that, but she doesn't really want to change. And so as she was leaving for the night, I was like, well, what are you up to? Like, it's 8:30. Are you going to bed? Do you read? She's like, I'll probably go drink a bottle of wine. And I was like, you shouldn't drink a bottle of wine. She's like, yeah, I know. It always feels good. And the next day you always feel terrible. I was like, well, that's because you drank a whole bottle of wine. So I was like, hey, can you do me a favor? So I told her that St. John's had stations. I was like, because she told me that she kind of church hops. I was like, you should come to stations. Like, there's a soup night. You can come to stations. It's not specifically for Catholics. You can learn a lot about Christ because she believes in the Bible. Like, you should do all these things. And I was like, hey, have a good night. I know, drive safe. And she was like, hey, thanks for talking. Most people don't really like to talk at the bar. And I was like, yeah, that's what bartenders do. And she's like, I don't think I'm going to drink a bottle of wine tonight. I was like, good. I hope you don't. And I was like, and there's nothing I can do to, who knows if I'll see her again. But it was just this like, okay, maybe
an inflection point.
Maybe I planted something and maybe she comes to St. John's and maybe nothing happens in her life is exactly the same. But who knows if that's a seed that's like, she doesn't drink as much, or she thinks about it a little bit before she does, or maybe she comes to St. John's and meets some good people and like her life has changed. Who knows? But anyway, yeah. Speaking of which, do you have conversations with you're seeing Double Bartending? Do you have conversations with people at the bar where I know weddings are a little bit different because it's like very much just everyone celebrating the bride and groom, and
Right.
everyone's getting drinks, and it's not like this slow, fourth drink kind of what's wrong with your life type
Some
conversation.
dive bar somewhere where,
but have you found that people get a few drinks in and they're a lot more open, and you feel like there's kind of a real conversation that happens there?
With the bartending, not so much, just because again, it's weddings, and also most of them at this point, it's been more word of mouth, local community, so a lot of Christian people.
Sort of people
it's
you know.
Not, right, yeah, it's not like someone who's deeply struggling with something, or just a lot of super broken people.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say that really happens there. I was bartending, or not bartending, I was a bar back at O'Sullivan's Irish Pub, in Arlington for a few months back in 2022. But that was from 9 o'clock till 2 or 3 in the morning. And that's the kind of thing where it's just packed, and I'm sure there's a lot of broken people, but most conversations you'd have would be with your coworkers, actually. And I was one of the few people who was religious, like traditionally religious, where it's like other ones would be like, oh yeah, I was kind of raised Christian, or some of them might even have been raised Catholic, baptized Catholic, and they just kind of fell away. So I would have more interesting conversations with them. One of the bartenders like loved Lord of the Rings, but is from a completely more like hipster
like the
approach.
nerdy
Right, and they like I would kind of have arguments with him, or like conversations with him about being like, it's like, Tolkien's like Catholic, and he said it's like
an explicitly Catholic work.
Well, not even explicitly, but like it's formed by Catholic principles. Like doesn't have to be like an allegory. Like I know Tolkien writes about like applicability as opposed to allegory, where C.S. Lewis is much more allegorical. But for him, it's like there's clearly Catholic principles here, but you'd have those conversations where he's like, I don't know, but like he literally had like tattoos of like the Shire on his arm. It's great, but like it was more of those like, okay, starting from a human point, like it's this great, beautiful film, and we both appreciate and love it, and even there it was kind of like I don't know what their lives are like now, and I doubt I made any difference, but the fact is, like, hell, they liked me. They're like, James is great, and he's Catholic, and he's like traditional Catholic. Like that's like they would just kind of assume, like, especially if they were raised Catholic, they would have a lot of brokenness, probably from falling away from the church, or it was just laziness and they just didn't really care. But you just it's those moments where it's like you had those good conversations with them, and they were kind of like, you could see something working there, but it doesn't mean anything's going to happen right then and there. But you're like, that's where you just pray and hope that there's a seed that was planted.
I saw this really funny post today that the Babylon Bee did, and it was like Tolkien and C.S. Lewis are sent to separate corners in heaven because of their disagreement over allegory, or something to that effect. It's pretty funny. Bartending is such a fascinating thing because you're either in this like really high pace like wedding, everyone's just, especially Catholic weddings are so fun, like people are generous with tips, everyone's like, maybe they want a specific drink, but like they're pretty open to like surprise me, or what's the classic cocktail,
and
or
most of the time it's this very
like,
innocent fun
everyone just wants
too.
like there's no like, people aren't like coming up and just doing like 10 shots, like they're having fun, they're generous, they're just really having a good time. And then as the bartender, you're just like flying, making drinks, and everyone loves you because you're the bartender. Right. But then you also get into those scenarios where it's like pretty slow and you're only making a few drinks. But then people come up and they've maybe had a couple drinks, but they get really honest about stuff. And I think the initial reaction is to be like, you're making a fool of yourself. Like you're talking about your love life, and I've met you once. But it's also kind of beautiful when you have people who come up and are just like, I don't have any friends, and you guys seem awesome, and then they just kind of spill everything, and you're like, wow. I would not do that, even if I was like pretty intoxicated. I think it would take me a lot to get to this point. And they're just like very open about stuff, and it's really cool. Like it's not quite the same as having drinks and being on a podcast or hanging out with your friends, but it's kind of along the same lines where you have a couple drinks and you loosen up a bit, and you're just able to talk about stuff. And people, especially if you can tell that they're feeling it a little bit, like they aren't going to get offended. Like they're just so open and relaxed about everything that conversation is like just really fun. Like you can be like genuinely enthusiastic and happy for them, and they're just like
and
super
you just hope
psyched
that
about
they
a
wake
thing
up
that
in the morning and remember the conversation.
Yeah, no, exactly. But But what caused you guys to start the company? Was that just like you were asked to do a bunch of events together, and you're like, we might as well
it started
do
with
our own thing?
Working with Mr. Brown in downtown catering, just doing the serving first, and then there were times where downtown catering would be in charge of the bartending too, and they would just need some of the servers to step up and serve beer and wine. So Joe and I started doing that, or sometimes it would just be one of us while the other one was serving. And Mr. Brown's local, so we'd be doing it where there were Criste people there, and they'd be like, oh, this is fun. There's twins behind the bar. Do you guys want to come and bartend our wedding? Like, it's just going to be on someone's property, and it's going to be beer and wine and like 2 or 3 mixed drinks. And Joe and I were like, yeah, sure. Yeah. And then it got to the point where it was consistent enough. We were probably doing that like 2 to 4 times a semester, and we enjoyed it. Growing up in an Irish Catholic family where there's this healthy relationship to alcohol too, I think it was like we had this deep appreciation for it in terms of community building and also hospitality, where it's kind of thing where people would come to our house during the summer, like all the different people that we'd have over, like one of the first things to do is like you say hi, but also like, hey, can I get you a glass of wine? Can I make you gin and tonic? Just the great memories of like just even summer evenings where we have a guest over. It might even be someone new that like we just invited, someone new to the parish, or an old friend who's a priest who serves somewhere in the Arlington diocese, and you say hi, and it's like one of the first questions you're going to be asked when you get to our house is like, hey, can we make you a drink? Something
Your
like
hand
that.
looks a little empty. Yeah.
Right. And it wasn't like we're like I don't think I've ever seen my parents drunk, but it was like they had this very healthy relationship with it, where it was for building. It had this end, like it was good in itself. It's something enjoyable that you like to enjoy, but it was also fostered good conversations, and you'd sit around the dinner table or even around a fire, or just sitting soft on the couch somewhere afterwards, and you're just having a couple of glasses of wine and having these great conversations. So I think it inculcated this sense of hospitality and also just community for Joe and I, and we did that with bartending. There's that kind of sense of that where, again, yeah, first of all, a lot of times it's weddings, so everyone kind of loves you, but like it's just a fun way of engaging with community and being able to offer something good, but also do it in a joyful way. Because you definitely get certain weddings you go to, and it's like, yeah, these people are just working paycheck to paycheck, and like, again, that's not like a judgmental thing, but like you can tell they're smoking weed, and it's just like they're just trying to make it by. But Joe and I have the opportunity where we've been given so much that's like, okay, well, we want to give back in that way where we can actually serve and do it joyfully, and also just the marketing for it too. We're 2 twin brothers seeing double. It works out. So it got to the point where we were just doing enough, and we enjoyed it. So we thought, let's make something of this and try to actually build it out. Because on top of enjoying it, it pays well. It's a nice side gig. So
yeah,
there's selfish pursuits in it too.
Totally. Yeah, it's a really fun thing to be able to market yourself as someone who can like provide the party, right? You're like, yeah, we can come, we'll make really good drinks. Maybe we have higher prices than some people, but lower prices than others.
What are you saying, Anthony?
Here's what you're too expensive. No. Honestly, don't even know what your prices are, but probably pretty low, I would expect. But just to be like, this is what we can provide. Like, if you want us to come up with a original cocktail, here's the price. If you want just beer and wine, it's a little lower, but we're going to provide a good service. We're going to be friendly. We're going to be honest with you. And those are kind of low standards, but I mean, for people getting married, it's like, you just need bartenders who are like, we'll take care of it. If we run out of ice, we'll go get more.
Right.
Like, the bar is covered. You don't have to worry about running out of wine. Like, This isn't going to be a wedding feast of Cana situation. Like, we're going to take care of everything, and you'll have to pay a fair price
whatever
for
we
it,
lack
but
in,
we're
like,
going to do it.
We might not be super fancy bartenders who are making these super exotic drinks, but it's like we'd rather actually make up for that in customer service, where we're just there to serve and do whatever we can for you, to make it a good event.
Yeah, and it I think most people that have been in like the food industry would know it's not as much of how much you know, like how many drinks you can make, what foods you can cook on the spot. It's more like, can you present it in a way that's like, how can I help you? What can I get you? What do you prefer? How can I like craft a cocktail to what you like? Do you have a special request? Do we have the ingredients? It's like just the ability to kind of read people and be able to make them a drink that they like and learn their names and actually ask it, like
building these micro relationships.
It's surprising how many people who, if the bar is a little bit slow, you're like, hey, where are you from? they'll talk to you for a couple minutes, and they'll come back and they'll bring a couple of their friends and be like, "Oh, this bartender's so cool. He made me this drink. It was amazing." And you're like, "Yeah, it was a rum and coke. Like, it really wasn't that good." But
or is your first time making?
But there's
it,
a connection.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
I didn't even know what it tasted like.
But again, I think it kind of goes back to like being genuine. Like
Right.
people just like genuine people. They don't want someone who's like following a recipe and on their phone and handing you a drink and not looking at it.
Right.
They want someone who's like, what do you prefer? Are you a bourbon guy? Are you a Scotch guy? Oh, I'm a Scotch guy. Oh, we have this Scotch. Do you want to try it? Like
Right.
that gets people because it gets them talking about what they're interested in. You learn something. They have a relationship with you. And like, I can remember specifically different weddings where people have come up and like thanked me for something. Or
Right.
there was the father of the bride one time came up and was like, "Hey, I have some extra whiskey. I'm going to hide it back here for, there's a certain select people." And at the end of the night, I did such a good job that he was like, "You just take the rest of the bottle." And it wasn't
Right.
there wasn't that much. It wasn't like a crazy expensive bottle, but it was just like, oh, he saw that I appreciated it, that I could talk intelligently about what I was making and what I was pouring.
Right.
And he was like, "Yeah, just take the rest of it." So it's really it's a fun thing as a bartender. It's also just fun as a guest if you have a good bartender.
Right.
Like,
And
it really makes
it's
the party.
the point too, where people aren't just coming back for a drink. They're kind of like, "Oh,
Yeah.
that bartender's great." Yeah, it's like it's an experience too,
Right.
and that's something that's really satisfying. Where people are excited just to come up to the bar because it's this experience.
Yeah.
And that's something that is
That's a
great.
topic I want to talk about sometime with probably a philosophy professor would be the person to talk to about it. But Thomas Aquinas talks about you should drink to the point of hilarity. And I always kind of wondered like where that line is and like what, like, how do you promote that without going too far? And how do you,
I answer that.
there it is. But yeah, no, it's a good time. It's that I can't even remember the line, but I think it's Chesterton who talks about like there's always a good time where like the sun does shine and there's like good beer
wine.
and red wine,
Yeah.
and it's so true. Like you have a good Catholic party, it's not going to beat anything else.
Are we keeping tallies? I think we've referred to like Chesterton 5 or 6 times.
Probably the
Thomas
most.
Aquinas 3
5 or
or
6.
4.
This is going to
No,
be.
that's-
We've been going a while, so this might be my closing question. Is that on the Broken Binnacle, you're trying to promote reading, writing, kind of like getting into the real world, and I think for most people who follow your Substack, like they benefit greatly from that, and probably the guys who write for it are able to maybe kind of push themselves to do that more than they would normally. But for you, and I'm curious because I kind of have to do the same thing with the podcast, is I feel like I have to like keep tabs on a lot of things and a lot of people, and most of that involves social media. So even if I'm creating this post about, which you do this way more than I do, and I think it's just the nature of your kind of your ministry, but you'll be like, G.K. Chesterton, whatever. But then it's like on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, and it's like you might just post that and leave, and that's fine. But I think most people that do that, you kind of are like keeping tabs on like potential people you want to bring into the circle, contacts, your networking, you want to spread the word. And there's a very fine balance between being well read and staying well informed and being like kind of addicted to social media. Under the guise of, well, it's for the podcast or, well, it's for the Substack. Like, I need to keep friending people and messaging people for this cause.
Right.
When really that might be undermining your cause. So how do you find a balance between, like networking and promoting what you're trying to do, and also just cutting all of that off and be like, I just want to like read essays and publish things and not care about social media and how many likes we get and all that stuff.
Right. I mean, for me, it's not so much the networking because it's not like we're a podcast where we're trying to get guests. I think that's something we're going to be doing more in the next year.
Spoiler
Alert, there's a podcast coming out for Broken Binnacle.
Let's go.
But
We'll have to change our mic setup to have 6 more people on.
every time. Well, that's hard because our podcast, I mean, there's 6 guys, and if we have 6 guys, that's a lot. So it's going to be trial and error as we go on. But with the social media thing, for me, it's more, when I originally created like the social media accounts, is more just to draw people into the Substack. Again, because trying to invite people into something that goes beyond just the constant, like, we have such a short attention span where it's like, sure, I can create these cool posts where it's like some quote from Chesterton or Chesterton, a quote from, I don't know, Edith Stein or some poem, and it's like this very aesthetic, cool post, but it's like, well, it's cool that inspired people, but like we want to invite them to something deeper, which is the Substack, where it's again long form. You have to engage with it as opposed to like 30 seconds. Okay, I'll hit the like button. I like that. There's pretty music with it. It's like I created all those accounts more for trying to draw people into something deeper. But there's definitely the struggle of like you make this post and you get kind of drawn to it. You're kind of like, oh, why didn't more people like it? Like, what am I doing? Like, what do I need to do? Like, I feel like I was getting more likes when I first started. We only had 300 followers, but now we have 700 followers, and like I'm getting way less likes or something like that. Like, I think that's more of a struggle, and I'm the one who does all of that, and it can be wearing. But the networking thing for us isn't there yet, so I'm not really wasting it that time. It's more for me like the social media content creation, where I probably put in a lot of time and care too much about like, oh, whether people like it. It's like I just need to be making it and posting it and move on. But there's definitely kind of like you become attached to that. It's like, wait, I didn't even create it for the social media. I created it so people would be drawn into it and then go on to something deeper.
And the way that social media is set up, like this happened the other day. We had a podcast with Father Gregory, and this is going to sound really dumb, but I got this notification be like, congrats, like a couple days after I posted it, you got 50 likes. And I was like, and it was presenting it as like this great milestone. I was like, 50 likes? Right. It sucks. Like 50 likes. That's embarrassing. But it was like, you got 50 likes. Do this, create a reel. Like it was encouraging you to like try to get more. Right. And I was like, that's not why I'm doing it. Like, that's why I didn't put up a clip of the podcast. Like I didn't do anything because I just posted it. People can listen to it. And we got more listens to the actual episode than we got likes on the post. So it's like, clearly people saw it, didn't like it, and then listened to it. But then I've got 2 or 3 different people who are like, that episode was great. Right. And those 2 or 3 comments mean way more to me than 50 likes. Because I know I go through and like stuff that I can't even tell you the next day what I liked, you know?
Yeah. But if you actually listen to 2 or 3 hours of the podcast, you're going to remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
well, it's funny because
just put it all into perspective.
I mean, there was an early post that I did. It was a GK Chesterton post.
All right, James, you need to branch out a little bit.
No, have you heard of Thomas Aquinas? I have to stop myself sometimes because there's times where I'm just like, because I'll quote I'll quote him a lot in these posts, but I have to stop myself from being like, oh, I did him like 2 or 3 posts ago. Like, I need to space him out. But it's his one quote, whereas the Christian ideal has not been tried and been found wanting, and has been tried I'm totally blanking.
The first part is right.
It has been It has been tried and found difficult, something like that.
Yeah, that sounds right.
And this was like pretty early on. Once I created the social media account, I only had like 200 to 300 followers on it, and it got like 10,000 likes. Like it was a lot.
It went viral.
Yeah, no, it was crazy. I was just like, what just happened? And I've never gotten anything like that. So it's the kind of thing where it's like, I don't think it was like any better of a post, but it's like you're so like, there's such a loss of control. There's certain things you can do to help it, but it's like, no, that doesn't matter. But you can depend so much on that, where it's kind of like you're just so human. You're kind of like you get the dopamine rush from that. It's like, well, I didn't even create this account because I was like cared about making these posts. Like it was for drawing something deeper, like the podcast. Like you got a lot of listens, and that's what's more important to you because that's what you actually originally created, and everything else is just to pull people into that. But it's definitely a struggle not to be pulled into that.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's not like I'm probably any better than you at this point. I think it's more just not creating content just to create content. It's more like, okay, when I have time, actually trying to create something good and beautiful, as opposed to, okay, how do I try to figure out something that's going to get me likes? It's like, no, if people don't like it, that's fine. But like, I'm doing it because I want to create something beautiful. So
yeah, for sure. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we've hit the 3-hour mark officially, so we should probably close it out for the night. James, thanks for coming on. Good talking to you.
Likewise.
This is Doing Virtue,
Catholic podcast,
Where virtue is what we do.
Cheers, folks.